The most super intelligent force of love possible is my shepherd, I shall not want. It maketh me to lie down in green pastures. It leadeth me beside the still waters. It restoreth my soul. It leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for its name's sake. Yea, though Benton walks through the valley of the shadow of death, he will fear no evil, for the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels of vibrational energy is with me. Or Benton. We went third person, messed it up. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels of vibrational energy preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. It anointeth my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall continue to follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels of vibrational energy forever. What's happening? Benton here. Waiting to leave the truck stop to make the delivery. Google says that the receiving facility opens at 8 a.m. However, a wrinkle, they also have a retail outlet store, actually multiple outlet stores on the property of the warehouse. So the warehouse could be 24 hours. Now, some may say, well, why not call and find out? I don't know. And perhaps your luck when trying to call random places that you are unacquainted with, perhaps you have a good track record. I don't. It's typically a waste of time. And what I found with the humans is a lot of cover your ass, CYA, meaning um, just say no to everything, right? Uh, don't promise anything. So I find it a complete waste of time to attempt to call these places personally. One moment, we're gonna roll out of the truck stop here, see what we can get into. Feel like yesterday's stream went well. Probably just do the one stream today. We've got about 3 hours of drive time. And let's see, I'm on Central, so it's 2 a.m. I started my clock at 2 a.m. and then we add 2 to that. That's 4 p.m. would be when my 14-hour clock would be up. But then if I can manage to, which I believe I can, most likely, if I can manage to get a minimum of 2 hours off duty, then that would allow for the possibility of a split break. So let's say that off duty time was 2 hours and 15 minutes, then I would be able to go as late as 6:15 on the 14-hour clock. So it's not really a 14-hour clock. It's like 14 hours with an asterisk. Stayed at a TA Express, smaller truck stops than the regular TA, but they're generally fairly brand new, as this one is. Pretty nice for what a truck stop is. Probably the best laundry room I've seen in a truck stop overall. All right, we got our coffee, what's left of it. I woke up ridiculously early, as I almost always do. I think it was like 10:30, and then I managed to lay back down for like 45 minutes. Hang on, let's check the fifth wheel release. Be right back. All right, here we go, rolling out. Amazon almost sold me a new phone yesterday. The push notification. Oh, hey, we know you've been looking at this Motorola phone, and turns out you can't order that to a Amazon locker, and we will deliver it overnight by between 4 and 8 a.m. And that almost worked with my schedule. If I hadn't already, you know, I don't want to say spiritually, but I was done for the day. Technically, I could have just went ahead and ordered it and then drove to that truck stop and parked there for the night, assuming I had enough time to make it, which I think I did. But then we get into, if they deliver it closer to 8 a.m., now the delivery's got to be made by 10 at the latest. I do like to get there early. Sometimes that is an advantage to get there early, right? Also being frugal of nature, looking at, it's like, can I really afford this? I decided that I could, but we did not order it. Probably won't be much longer though. Then they dropped the price of the Google Pixel 9 down to $600, but I'm still hearing a lot of complaints about the battery life on pretty much all the Pixels, so I think we're out of that business. I like everything else about the Pixel. It's a shame. And it certainly has the software advantage since it's Google Android. And then I've been thinking about just in general. Hang on, let me check. Are we going the right way? Oh yeah, we are. They're taking us through. We're going down a state highway here. Yeah, this truck stop was a little bit off the beaten path of where I was going, so got to backtrack to the interstate. Headed up to the Chicago area, not Chicago proper, but you never know. There's always the possibility of being sent to make a pickup, which Chicago's not too bad, actually. And most of the folks know how to drive, which is always good, especially in heavy traffic. It's definitely on the easier side of being able to actually make a lane change in an 18-wheeler in traffic, so that's nice. Shout out to Chicago. Hey, 7 in the house. What's happening? I better perform, right? We do have a check engine light on. It came on overnight while idling. And good news as far as the speed of the truck getting turned down. And I still will have an opportunity, especially if I manage to stay with the company some period of time, I can probably talk them into bumping it up at least a couple of miles an hour. But it's gotten rid of that problem where the truck was obsessed with switching into neutral to save fuel. So it's not doing that anymore. So that's good. That was not a fan of that. And as I suspected, as each new model year of these trucks has come out and they've updated the software, probably this was overdue for a software update, I would assume. And I guess if enough, and truck drivers are good at complaining, so if enough drivers complain over time, and so that is one of the things about this realm and Moloch's machine and all of this. Just from a practical standpoint, I actually recognized this when I worked at Outback Steakhouse as a server for about 3 years. At a certain point, using their point of sale software, right, and which also POS can also stand for something else, but there was a recognition that the people that designed it for themselves, and they don't ever actually use it other than bug fixes and actually supporting it. They make it and then practically speaking never use it again, right? Because if they were made to use it every day like I was, then it certainly would never have been designed in that way. And I think a lot of systems, software technology, that's the case. It's like, shouldn't the people who design it actually use it to some extent? That, to me, makes more sense. So what do I know? But anyway, happy to, and back to the, proper identification and this theme about, my soul or essence or nature and all of this, and perhaps yours as well, although I'm not able to speak to that. Thankfully, I'm actually to me, it's helpful that I'm not able to speak to anybody else's experiences and their makeup internally and what they are, because I believe that's supposed to be discrete to each of us, or more correctly, it seemingly has to be, based on the spiritual war and the nature of salvation, if that's a thing, or judgment, right? Again, if that's a thing, um, which is where religion so quickly fails, in my estimation, is this idea that, religion is here to tell me about me, right? Um, but in a more like, we're right and eternal damnation, is the price. It's a little different when I'm agreeing to let astrology tell me about my personality or whatever. It's quite different in the context of, especially being raised as a child in a religion, as I was. Got the laundry done, washed all my socks, forgot to wash my old fanny pack since I bought a new one, but oh well, no big deal. Usually not a fan of the front loading machines, but they had actual like uh, laundromat quality industrial machines, the Speed Queen or whatever it is, whichever brand. Because the El Cheapo front loaders are just complete garbage. Way better off with the old school, top loading with the agitator. The agitator beats the clothes up and wears them out over time, but overall, other than that, way better than the bullshit ass front loaders in my experience. All right, we're almost on to the interstate here. And thinking back to, realistically, if I was in communication with the company this morning, their preference most likely would be for me to wait, almost as long as possible to start my clock, right? My logs for the day. But more and more I'm seeing it's really about everybody. It's been every man for himself for quite some time on some level. And, as long as it's somewhat justifiable, why wouldn't I do what I prefer? You know, why wouldn't I? And if I already knew the next assignment, see, here's another. This is where uh, we get into the nature of, my job is 7 days a week, 24 hours a day at times, and the people I'm working with, maybe they work weekends, the dispatch folks, but they're more inclined, and they probably work some late shifts, but it's still pretty close to just your standard, office hours. And then, probably almost all of them get, at least part of Saturday off, if not maybe the whole day, right? And then probably all day Sunday, except for whoever's got to be, you know, on call for in case some shit goes wrong. But so because of the way society is structured, that's realistically it's one of the few reasons why I would not have already know what I'm doing next. So if I knew what my next assignment was after this delivery and I needed to start my clock later, right, that would be different. But, what's the point of not suiting myself and then they knew all along what I was going to do next and just did not tell me, right? How silly of me. Someone's gotten fascinated with watching my face in the mirror. So we'll slow down. And now we're slowing down for a construction zone anyway. That happens way more often when I'm doing these live streams than if I'm just listening to content driving down the road. What is that about humanity? There's something in us built in. We love to look at faces for whatever reason. And I don't mean individually, because I'm certainly not that way. In fact, with the undiagnosed fake autism, I'm almost sure that left to my own devices, I would not be looking people in the face that much. I was trained to make a lot of eye contact, which for a lot of people is why I can't possibly be undiagnosed fake autistic, because I make so much eye contact. In fact, in my later years, I'm training myself out of that. In fact, to not. You know, a lot of people don't like it either. You know, can come across as somewhat aggressive. I don't stare at people, but you know, there's still something to that. A lot of construction zones with no work being done. We're on I-55 headed up to Chicago land. Shout out to the chat. Oh, I brought up the spiritual topics, and I believe I failed to make my point. So let's go back to that. What's the sign say here? Chicago 191. Uh, can I remember why I brought that up? Oh, just generally, it does sort of, now I kind of have to be less negative, I guess would be the way to put it. Less negative. That's the point I was going to make, which is interesting for me. The culture in which I was socialized was wholly negative, right? People express themselves negatively, a lot of negative. I mean, the actual phraseology of the language was almost completely negative, right? A lot of what we call poor mouthing, right? If you don't know what I mean, it's probably Googleable, I would assume. Poor mouthing, you know. I've noticed even myself to this day, I'll have a certain sort of derisive tone of voice sometimes when I refer to something that actually I'm more neutral about, but I'll sound like it's something I consider to be bad or objectionable, whatever phenomenon I'm referring to. It's definitely a deep South thing, or has been in the past. Certainly the last couple of generations through the public school system, and then the further corporatization of the populace, the corporate structure, especially, social media, in my view, affording greater opportunities and a greater means of making, the humans across all of America more alike than unalike in a lot of ways, especially around uh, political correctness, right? Even something like a channel I listen to, and I think it's a Gen Z. I'm pretty sure. I think he's still in his 20s. It's Matt Be Great. It's the only way I keep up with college football anymore, because I can't even deal with the Arkansas Razorbacks content. It's just so ridiculous at this point. But so I keep up with what's going on in the sport in general, and if anything of note happens at Arkansas, I'll end up hearing about it most likely, or not, which is fine. One moment, coffee sip. But he started to refer to the game, you get a bunch of kids together, and just our version of this game was somebody would kick off, and then whoever caught the football, you might have one team that's blocking for him or whatever, or it's just, and now everybody's trying to smear the queer, right? And that's the name of the game. That's what it's called. And then so he almost said it, and then he corrected himself. And now part of that is being on his own YouTube channel that he earned his living from, right? But then, how many decades now has it been mommy, right? Mommy, uh, if you got a couple of boys running around the house and one of them blurts out smear the queer, now we're going to get a talking to and admonishment, right? Versus when I was a child, my mother, and I don't think anybody else's mother would have ever said, well, don't say faggot, don't say queer, right? And I'm not taking a stance either way on, whether it's just good, bad, or indifferent. It's more of a sign of the times, right? I would say. And then also plays into like taboo and repression, right? The Southern culture is certainly very repressive, but then America in general, back to the idea of the Puritans, right? Puritanical, Protestantism, where I don't know a lot about Catholicism, but arguably does a little bit better in a way, right? A less bad, I should say, perhaps a less repressive overall of just the human, especially the certain types of desires. But again, certainly has its problems, without a doubt. And again, it's a religion, so it's a system of man, therefore it is demonic. Right? Now, as much as I claim to not be able to be as negative, well, I can still go, I'm still going to face reality. Humankind uh, being comprised almost completely of individuals who, in my estimation, are incorrectly identified with their own nature within themselves, and in fact, are incorrectly identified with the realm itself, right? And this is where we get ideas around, oh, well, nobody wants to work these days, right? Well, okay, if I say that, right, am I repeating something I've heard other people say? Perhaps, but then what is that statement based on? It's based on, what am I identifying with? I'm identifying with my past experiences. I'm identifying with the fact that as a 49-year-old, I busted my ass in a lot of low level, some of them were physical jobs, some of them were office jobs or IT jobs, and some of them were, actual customer service or, even waiting tables was pretty demanding physically. And I've done a lot of day labor here and there as well, just hard manual labor. And then it also shows, the boomers and the Gen X, probably into the older millennials, this notion of hard work as a virtue. And then, as an idea of question everything, well, what about, if we're going to make hard work a virtue, and now the Cold War has been over with and the Soviet Union collapsed when I was still in high school, right? And I'm considered a boomer now because of, how much of the culture of the internet has permeated society. As far as the young folks are concerned, I'm a boomer and that's fine. But, and then by the way, Gen X forever young. So in fact, if I'm addressing Gen X is like, what are you talking about? You're still young. And then by the way, the actual boomers like my mom, the old folks like my grandmother that I finally spoke to recently, she's 90. So if I tell her I'm almost 50, it's like, yeah, you're a whippersnapper or whatever, which I understand. It's a matter of perspective, but the reality is, my generation will never view themselves as old, and in fact, I offended somebody in the YouTube comments by referring to Gene Hackman's wife as elderly. But it's like, yeah, we have a definition of elderly. That was an elderly woman. I understand he was 96 or whatever. And maybe she was keeping up appearances, for a woman who married a man, a leading man in entertainment, right? And I'll admit, she was attractive. Gene Hackman's wife, when he married her, she was attractive. I guess she was probably mid-40s when they got together. Yeah, she's a good-looking woman. But I don't know what she's 62, 65. That's a senior citizen. I hate to break it to you. And then again, a 50-year-old Gen Xer or maybe even older Gen X, I think goes all the way to almost 60 now, right? Close to 60. So, the horror, especially of a woman saying, well, what do you mean? And they're only going to hear old woman. You say elderly. It's like, yeah, she was an old woman. That's what that was. Who besides Anna Nicole Smith is married to a 96-year-old that's not an old woman, by the way? Again, merely applying logic and reason, as I'm wont to do, WONT. But I know I'm starting a lot of different cans. I'm opening a lot of different cans. So let me see if I can go backwards a little bit here to wherever I started some of these threads. One moment, please. I know I was on to something else that I abandoned, which is okay as long as I can go back to it at some point. And I've been doing better. I will give myself credit. I've been doing better with this of late. Shout out to my favorite nootropic these days, dark chocolate. I've already had my 1.7 ounces of dark chocolate. Well, and until I can remember what I wanted to talk about just then, I want to go back to also to concepts around work and employment. And one of my favorite channels talks about this, Millennial Steam, uh, certainly doom or black pill content, but highly recommended. And, in this corporate, the corporate Borg overlay. Oh, well, hang on. Before I move in, actually, both are apropos. So back to what I'm talking about, these generations and the idea of hard work as a virtue. And what is that, by the way? The boomers and even the greatest generation to some extent. And so what I would say is with the boomers, as our own self images and our own images of ourselves and how we view ourselves because of advertising, I would say that was really probably coming on board sort of the Mad Men era, right? That was, that's what that show was about. In part, the rise of advertising and the influence, So that was, my parents graduated high school about 1973. So then the Don Draper stuff, I'm pretty sure Mad Men started right about 1960. So you already had a full decade of the proverbial Don Drapers of the world, putting ideas into the soft heads of Americans, right? Psychological programming, and already in a context of psychological programming, by the way. And then whatever, again, trauma-based mind control, the trauma of the Vietnam War, and just all of a great time of societal upheaval and change, right? But going back to my famous ancestors generation, the greatest generation, I believe that's what he was. There's also the silent generation. Was it the greatest generation and then the silent generation? See, I'm not even completely sure how this works, but so we'll broad stroke it. So it seems to me like prior to that, culturally, people were way more reserved and not really able to, it wasn't as acceptable to put on airs and this is also some of the early steps of society, sociologically and anthropologically going down the road of, embracing some of the more narcissistic traits that we now see on full display, in which, all roads lead to narcissism. Adam Carolla started saying that like 15 to 20 years ago, right? It's the society itself has become narcissistic in many ways. I would assert that would be my assertion. And so part of this is, who raised that generation. So if I happen to talk to a lady in the truck stop, and she's probably Gen X, although younger than me, perhaps. If not, she's doing okay, but probably she could have been close to my age and maybe just, not as unhealthy as a lot of the folks, right? But a very blue collar type of lady, working class, underclass, not trying to, if she's 47, or maybe even older than me, perhaps, if she's 52, not trying to come across like she's still in her 20s or her early 30s. By the way she dresses, the fitness has come into it. And how much of this, by the way, is born out of what's going on in California, especially Southern California, right? When I started going to Santa Barbara, years ago now, it's like, that's just the culture there. Every woman takes care of herself. It's much different than art. And now, so the rest of the country's becoming like that. And then, within 3 hours of a major city probably has it. But so this lady physically was not trying to keep herself, looking like she's not dressing like she's in her 20s or 30s, but, she came across as healthy overall, but very indoctrinated and had some like teenage boy in tow. And he seemed autistic, but don't they all, right? Don't they all nowadays? On some level. And introverted, I think, would probably just be the proper way to refer to that. Either way, so she was miffed. Again, she's still operating based on a specific cultural context that no longer exists. By the way, this is bad for her. See, I've updated my cultural context, which means when I go into a nice, relatively new truck stop, I understand that, you know, I don't know how TA, if they directly own and operate all their stores, or if this is some version of a franchise agreement. Perhaps, like I did see some Middle Eastern Sikh type of people, right? Uh, but they're, it's still possible that they just take a corporate job, right? Who knows? But I saw at least a couple of those types. But who know, at this point, they could have been born in America. I'm not xenophobic or ignorant. It's like, yeah, the fact that the guy's got a turban on, the fellow that was in there tonight is like, but looking at him, he certainly grew up on American levels of nutrition. Like this dude, you ever see somebody that looks like they could be a fucking bodybuilder or like a strong man, but you got a pretty good idea they don't work out or lift weights, and definitely had some body fat on him. But it's like, this motherfucker did not grow up over there, and now he's looking like this at his age, right? And I figured this out by knowing a bunch of Indians and meeting their tiny little fathers. But then all the boys are like, the boys my age are just gigantic. It's like, what is this? And it's like, yeah, our fathers did not have access to enough calories. Like the genes are there, we just didn't have enough calories. Our dads did. I was like, all right, makes sense. So probably these people have been in America for a while. Americans, by the way. This idea of American meaning white or urban black, right? Or what we might call African American, which does show that it's classism, because that's basically the same thing at this point, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty fucking close. I understand a lot of folks grow up and they're nowhere near a black person, but that's fine. And less common, some black folks grow up around not that many white people, but at this point, it's basically melting potted us into more or less the same thing. With, yeah, there's some cultural differences. I think I'm onto something there. But so she, even out of her own mouth, I get into, she's lamenting at a certain point, more or less, she's like, hey, there's no lids. But there's literally one woman working in the place at the time. Now, maybe everybody else is outside doing truck stop activities. I don't fucking know. But effectively, she's the only worker. She's trying to work the counter. I walk in, the lady working there. And so the guy, whoever's the customer at the counter, as soon as I arrive, he leaves. Meanwhile, I'm not in a hurry. I'm just going to ask a question. I want to make sure I'm not expected to pay for parking. And so he leaves, and I start asking about the parking, but then he immediately returns, because it turns out he's not intelligent enough to understand that if he wants to prepay for gas, they're going to ask him for what pump is he on, right? And pointing at the parking lot and saying that one right there means nothing, because many times I've worked at a gas station and had someone point at their vehicle through the window only to have me say, you do understand that you're pointing at everything outside the window, right? There's no way for me to follow an imaginary line from your finger to whatever you're pointing at. You're pointing at everything, sir. Or someone pointing and then saying Chevy. It's like, yeah, every car out there is a Chevy, right? What is this? And I'm being punked by the realm, clearly. I'm the idiot. But anyway, in that context. So, and now I'm being admonished, right? Because it's not my turn, and the lady's basically like, hey, I can only do one thing at a time, which is, yeah, I understand, I get it, it's fair enough, and now I see what's going on here, right? And it is a version of, so the flip side of nobody wants to work is, why would a person show up to slave away in customer service at the TA Express at, by the way, this woman's age, 55 probably, maybe 60, and for a non-living wage, right? Like, what's the motivation? Okay. And so I see both sides of it. I see it's, I want to have whoever's working at the stores I go to, I would like to receive proper service, but the customer is always right days are over, right? This idea of, I'm going to have my ass kissed because I walked in the front door with greenbacks. It's not 1987 anymore, right? Meanwhile, that was coming out of a particular economic period, right? And it was a great time of economic growth in certain ways, right? And a lot of the corporatism, the corporate dystopia of today, a lot of that was being fomented back then, right? Like I remember what Walmart was like in 1987. Very different experience than today, right? They were still the up and comer to some extent. I can remember when Kmart was the better store in my hometown. Like it wasn't just a given that, yeah, Walmart's uh, strong and Kmart's a fucking joke. I think I'm pretty sure Walmart, we would go to Kmart and then there was a TG and Y that we went to for certain items. And it was more or less Walmart was like third because we certainly, and they didn't have groceries back then either. So it was more of the discount store model, but then it was beginning to morph into the step by step towards the supercenter concept, right? I have memories of all that. I am helpful, by the way, because I'm still I don't consider myself young, but a lot of folks would consider me that. But I still have my ability to interface with old concepts and the past. By the way, and I know I'm telling like 10 stories simultaneously, and I'll get back to the lady and the idea. I will certainly get back to the idea of nobody wants to work these days. But when I went to pay for my coffee this morning, I waited because there was a truck driver bozo, and he was probably closer to early 40s. I'm assuming. I could certainly tell I was, you know, maybe he was like an older millennial, not a Gen Xer, and certainly not. And a rough life, probably with abusing the substances, most likely, and probably has urine on him at all times in case he gets randoed. One of these, right? And maybe he was just on the sleep deprivation uh, instead of the meth. Who knows? But he's clogging up the counter, buying a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of ridiculous nonsense, overpriced, truck stop gadgets and knickknacks and such, trinkets and baubles. Uh, but at a certain point, I said, and he's one of these people, got certainly ex meth head, but because he's got something clever to say immediately in response to anything I might say, right? So I said, but I'm responding to what he says, by the way. Because it's like, yeah, sir, I understand you've got a cute, witty remark, but I'm talking about what you're talking about. So like, yeah, if I had introduced a new topic, fair enough. But like, why are you busting my chops when I'm just responding to what you said, right? But although he was not addressing me, so fair enough. But um, I said some version of yes. I made a joke about spreading awareness, which I'm also joking about this idea of yeah. If people only knew what was going on, of course they would do the right things. I think he was remarking about whatever cheap garbage he's buying. Maybe somebody in Brazil and by hand created this thing, which obviously came out of a machine or a factory somewhere. But whatever. He's commenting on slave shop, sweatshops or whatever. And then the notion of tariffs and the whole thing going on in the zeitgeist. And I'm like, oh yeah, spread awareness. Sort of fun of the idea of being able to fix any of this, but he doesn't know that that's what I mean. So he comes back with something around that sounds like something that would have to do with STDs. And now I get to hit him with, oh, in my day, it was still called VD. And I don't think he knew what I was talking about. So yeah, venereal disease. And that's not an exaggeration. When I was in school, and certainly the public, the corporate indoctrination centers of the public schools wanted to start teaching me about venereal disease and all of this. But because I'm from Arkansas, they had to really wait until the locals would accept it. And then I'm the type, if I, went into a different classroom and I found a textbook from one of the older kids, I would probably read it just out of curiosity and my own obsession with taking in information. So quite early on in my life, I was aware that it was called VD, not STD was later, right? And in fact,
If anybody's watched reruns of the earlier seasons of a Saturday Night Live, I remember at least a skit or two involving like Bill Murray or whoever talking about VD and not Valentine's Day. You know, and so in some ways, it's almost like I went to school in the '60s, like in a way, because a lot of what was in my classroom was from the '60s. You know, with Arkansas having a culture of, yeah, we'll buy all of these books and these, you know, mimeographs and these, we'll buy these, you know, whatever, you know, whoever showed up at the, whoever, you know, cold called the administrator selling, you know, whatever bullshit, you know, optional educational materials. Like, yeah, we'll buy these, but then we're going to use them for 25 motherfucking years, right? Until they just fall apart or enough of the shit got lost, right? So whatever was in my classroom when I was in third or fourth grade, a lot of that was from the '60s. And in fact, some of that got worse when I got into junior high because my elementary school was constructed. I went to a modern at the time elementary school, but then the junior high was still old as fuck. So actually, I'm probably more thinking about junior high. In a way. So then, you know, I'm getting into this, but again, the death of, so no more third spaces, right? Everybody is in a hurry. Like who's going to take the time to just have a conversation, you know? And meanwhile, part of me talking to people is, you know, within the last 2 or 3 weeks of this coming to understand my true nature, like I'm treating people like, you know, hey, how you doing? There's a lot less of just me like, hey, leave me the fuck alone, right? Uh, and I'm just sort of, and I have this nature anyway, but I'd gotten away from it. So I'm a little more in a good mood and affable and more open to just at least say, hey, how you doing? Type shit. And it's mostly women, you know, it's mostly women in these spaces also. And apologies for my poor storytelling. I'm all over a lot of ideas firing off in the old noggin. So you could tell this lady, the customer lady's kind of annoyed by having to wait and then approach the counter and be like, hey, you're out of lids. And then, and again, because I've worked in these type of places and I understand the corporate side of it and I've worked in convenience stores. And by the way, the woman actually is attempting to do a good job. So now she's in the fucking storeroom trying to find lids. Well, they're clearly out of the jumbo lids. Meanwhile, this is the most American thing ever. We're making a beeline to the styrofoam cup, the largest styrofoam cup available, because we want the largest we're trying to get the largest soda water out of the machine. And the lady she was so petite, the customer lady, she's obese, right? Fucking obese. You know, she might have looked relatively healthy, her skin and everything, but you know, and some people just genetically are going to look healthy, but it's fucking obese lady, right? If she's 200 pounds at 5'1" with a small frame for a woman, that's obese, right? And you know, certainly the lady behind the counter was hefty, right? But not sloppy. You get into the, you know, within shouting distance of a major city, you know, it's less slop than what you're going to have in Arkansas or whatever. You know, it's less sloppy. So I'm observing all of these dynamics, right? So I'm able to put this puzzle together, and I'm never going to add to a service worker's burden, right? Waiting tables completely broke me of the ability to get angry with service workers or to treat them poorly. You know, I might just be like, all right, well, I'll just abandon this mission or come back later, or I might just be like, yeah, that's unfortunate that I'm here with money and this is just not possible. But you know, I can't, and I'm incapable of treating the service worker poorly. Now, if they're shitty with me, that's different, right? And then the plight of the human. So this brings me also, while I still attempt to tell this very mundane story that's not going to have a payoff, I see now, but it's also notions around, I'm beginning to develop a lot of compassion for just the working class, because at this point, the strategy for earning enough money to get through their lives financially is to work multiple jobs, side hustles, the gig economy. But then, so what so corporatism is simultaneously saying, okay, individuals, if you have an aptitude, meaning like Benton, maybe you have half a brain in a nerdy egghead kind of way, but then, Benton also has certain autism and all of this. But so it's like, it's sort of to the individual who's young and vigorous enough, hey, get your shit together. And it's maybe not pursue higher education, but figure out how to make yourself valuable to the corporation at the level of, we will pay $250,000 a year for a certain skill set for a period of time, by the way, for a period of time, because Amazon is now just out of its own mouth, more or less making it clear that, oh, we want to burn these people out at our, not the $250,000 level, but they're basically saying, we have designed our warehouses so that we know our employees are going to last the ones who are good employees who prove themselves capable. Which, if you think about it from a corporate standpoint, makes perfect sense, because now we're back to the historical model of the hard work as a virtue. That was in the old days of the proverbial gold watch, some measure of, I'm loyal to the company, the company's loyal to me in exchange, living wage, the milkman can earn enough that his wife can stay home with kids, all of this Americana. And that is in part what people think they mean when they say make America great again. That's never coming back. Right? It's never coming back. Not in that form, anyway. Is my audio fucked? Hang on, my audio might be fucked. I wish somebody let me know my audio was fucked. I didn't know that I wasn't on my Bluetooth. I wasn't on the Bluetooth this whole time. That's a bummer. That's a bummer. What's up, Just Out? Yeah, I suspected when I jumped out of the truck earlier to check the fifth wheel, I thought, I might be going far enough away from the phone that it might switch to the speaker phone, the phone mic. And then when I got back in, I thought, I should probably check that. And then I said, it'll be fine. And so fast forward to, I've been talking for 45 minutes on the wrong fucking microphone. So that explains why briefly we were up to 7 people, and then it went to 3, and now it's back to 6. Apologies for talking for so long on the wrong audio. That's my bad. My bad. Bad streamer. Bad streamer. It's the little things, right? Details. Details. So anyway, I have no idea how much of what I've been yapping about was heard or understood. I'm so fucking loud, I have to assume that if people were willing to persist through the background noise, that my voice was in there somewhere. So let's back up a little bit, because I might need to hone in on some of this, since I don't know what's been intelligible up to this point. I'll have to assume it's effectively unlistenable, but I don't know. I don't know that I can really start over. I've already developed a momentum with these ideas. That's a shame, because I was really getting into a lot of things culturally, intergenerational, right? The generation gaps. Certainly, the theme of hard work as a virtue, which did used to serve the lower classes, the working classes, and the underclass, right? And there was a time in America when it was affordable enough, and in conjunction with the culture of living below one's means, right? It was possible in the past to just hard work right, and accomplish whatever needed to be accomplished in conjunction with, you know, a less of a consumer society. And in 1920, right, in the 1920s, American culture, people were not able to purchase products and services as a way to sort of, you know, demonstrate their own place in the world, right? Like show the world that you've arrived by smoking this brand of cigarette or smoking at all, you know, by wearing this brand of watch, by driving this car, right? And that, a lot of that I talked about earlier on the stream came out of like the TV show Mad Men, you know, whatever that was. And that show was set beginning in 1960. And then I was talking about, you know, the actual boomers, my dad and mom graduating high school in 1973. So their early upbringing, you know, would have been a whole decade of you know, advertising really, you know, maybe taking its first full shot at the populace at the level of, you know, show them your stuff, you know, instead of prior to that, more of a cult. It just really would not have been as culturally acceptable to tie in one's own view of themselves with being ostentatious or, you know, putting on of airs, right? Why did that expression exist at all? You know, he or she is putting on airs, you know. Fuck. Back to the lady working there, and you know, I understand what she makes, maybe 15 an hour at the most. Although I don't know what Illinois' minimum wage is, but let's just give her 15 an hour, right? Meanwhile, I make, based on the actual hours that I worked, although I do work off the clock, paid for something like 58 hours. So if we factor in what time and a half would be, I make about $24 an hour. Now it varies, obviously, but in this last week, I would have earned by the hour. If you look at time and a half over 40 hours, you're looking at, and I worked more than 58 hours, certainly, but you're looking at $24 an hour. So she's making, I don't know, she could be making more, but 15 probably. Could be less, by the way, depending on are they legally allowed to pay her less. Could be less. No more than 18, certainly. So, you know, and I walk up to the counter, you know, I wait for the guy to leave, and then I just I blurt out my question. And part of that is just, you know, not that I'm presumptuous or in a hurry. It's like, part of that is sometimes the clerk will just be like, "Hey, dummy, like you're standing there and like get on with it," you know. Uh, it can be less formal than what I'm used to in Arkansas, you know, which is like, let's wait to be waited upon, right? Whatever that formal thing is, you know. And then, by the way, back to the olden days of customer service where, you know, as a customer and the customer's always right under the old model, you know, if I'm going into a place with money to spend, I'm almost always being greeted, right? How are you? I'm well, thank you. How are you today? You know, the whole formal, all of that, which is falling by the wayside. So now I'm somewhat admonished for, you know, hold your horses, buddy. But it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm not champing at the bit over here. And in fact, the autism part of it is I still felt compelled to say, but in a neutral tone, not in an irritated fashion, which is, you know, basically like, you know, I only said anything because I waited for the guy to leave, right? You know, and silly me, you know, for thinking I was next because the guy physically left the counter, you know, right? Uh, but I found, you know, as long as I'm able to not be angry or annoyed, it's mostly neither here nor there. But then we're all sort of coping, you know, in the moment anyway. It's like I think we've all recognized just the stresses of modern life. And by the way, the hard work is a virtue society of the 80s and probably the 70s and all of this, and even before that, that was a more of a stressed out and angry and mean culture. By the way, go back to entertainment of the olden days, especially cartoons like Popeye, even Mickey Mouse, early Mickey Mouse. Dude, society was fucking mean back in the day based on entertainment, right? Just straight up mean. Uh, what was that all about? And some of this was just, as I think, this version of like, we're going to just we're going to grab life and make it our bitch to some extent. And then, how much of life was, a person shows up to the blue collar job. They don't really know how to be a fucking, whatever the job is. They don't really know how to do it. So it's some version of just, okay, now you're the new guy. You're wet behind the ears and we're just going to fucking, we're going to boss you the fuck around and train you up. Right. And just part of that is just mean. Like, hey man, what the fuck's wrong with you? Get with it, get her done. And that was, by the way, the notion of, which I still hear this every once in a while, the idea of here's how to get a job back in the day is you go to the place you want to work at, you show up every morning before, right about the time everybody goes to work, or, you show them that you're always going to be there when they get there. And then, maybe you see, okay, here's a broom and I'll sweep up or whatever. Right. And then eventually they're like, okay, man, now it's, tomorrow is your first day or whatever. That whole culture. That's over, folks, because it's all corporate. And so that wasn't really a thing by the time I, made it to adulthood. Although in junior high, I worked for one of my teachers in junior high, the one teacher who thinks he's cool, right? Even though he's old as fuck and still trying to be young. Although not to the kids, he was still trying to be young and like probably go into the nightclub type of dude, right? And had one of the worst hair pieces of all time, a mullet hair piece. Laughably bad, dude, laughably. And this was, by the way, back in the days when, that was probably hundreds of dollars, he just could not afford to purchase a decent hairpiece. It wasn't within his salary, but I didn't know this. I was a child. But he would tell it to us like it was, right? And which I appreciated. But, he was telling his story of like, this is how you get a job, back in my day, more or less. And that was gone. What was a thing, though, was in the rise of corporatism and all of this all hands on deck, build the country up. It's still, we're still living the USA versus USSR, even though the USSR had already collapsed. It was still the culture of, build up America. These are our businesses and our businesses are in direct competition with the USSR. So we need to build all this up, right? And how much of America fell for that bullshit? So my thing was, all I had to do, and I was spoiled in a way. If I was willing to do a low-level service job, service level, like work at a gas station, whatever that is, work at Blockbuster Video, all I did was show up and say, can I talk to the manager? Because I knew, based on experience, yeah, they're going to want me to fill out an application, but not until they've decided to hire me. Now, what lesser mortals had to do was go place to place and ask for applications, then take their stack of applications home, fill them out, bring them back the next day. Well, part of that was, I'm quite nerdy and studious, and, I was always done with my tests and quizzes first in school. So I know that if I'm going to be made to fill out an application, well, I might just leave, right? I might just be like, oh, I'm good on all that. I'll just leave and go across the street. And they might, again, now some of that might be the manager's not here. Do you want an application? No, I'm good. Right. Because that was a different environment. See, that now we're in an environment where simultaneously you have the idea of nobody wants to work. Probably work was more attractive back in my day based on how brainwashed we were, and then the cultural differences in the younger generations, which I'll get into if I ever manage to continue. If I ever manage to finish the story that I've been telling for like an hour now. But it's all apropos. It's apropos of something, to be sure. And I'm interfacing. So I want to go back and make the point about when I'm talking to the lady, the customer, who's most likely Gen X, which is also boomer in a way, right? And so she's had a similar, pop culture and propaganda, Cold War programming to myself, but I've updated all of this within myself, meaning I have an ability to relate to the younger folks because I recognize that each generation is superior to the previous generation in certain ways. Because when Gen X came along, there was a version of we were sort of having our butts kissed in a way. There was an honoring of that we were more sophisticated in certain ways, and we were sort of this vanguard of this new thing, right? Pop culture. A lot of it had to do with pop culture, right? But and just general sophistication and all of these things. And then that was by the way, the movie Office Space, that was sort of the move into, you know, in a way being the first generation where, like me, even being from Arkansas, bumfuck Arkansas, it's like just solely based on having half a brain, I was identified as it would be a ridiculous waste of human resources to send him off to the Votech, right? Because this is not a plumber, this is not an electrician, this is not a carpenter. He's too good for that because he's already proven he has the capability to sit in a classroom and read a book and, score very high on standardized testing to some extent, right? Meaning, I made a 25 on the ACT without even really trying, right? Which wasn't great, by the way, but it's like that's like the lower end of could possibly get a scholarship, right? Whereas if I had applied myself, I would have made like a 32 and it would have been guaranteed. If I'd actually tried, right, would have made a 32. But who cares? You know, don't give a fuck. And so all of the system, of course, would have been able to recognize all of this. My own father being college educated, and then I was so fucking programmed through the Jehovah's Witness religion, I wasn't thinking for myself. If I had just done what I wanted to do, right, based on what this realm would want and demand from me, my life would have been a lot better. But my life would have been a lot worse because I would have been way more identified with this realm, probably to this day, to my own detriment. Certainly all of this spiritual awakening and progress that I'm demonstrating would most likely never have happened, right? And it is all about me, on some level, on many levels. From my perspective, of course. So the updating of the programming is the Gen X idea of hard work, but then also this lady is selfishly lamenting nobody wants to work anymore, but I don't think she understands what she means is, I think from her perspective, it wasn't that long ago that I was working at a gas station called Point Convenience in downtown Fort Smith, Arkansas, and the downtown was in the process of beginning to die, but there was still enough blue collar industry going on, and there were enough people. By the way, what was fueling the people's willingness to work was methamphetamine. That's what it was. Okay. It wasn't a moral superiority. It was a, hey, here's a bunch of methamphetamine, and I know y'all like money, and you got mouths to feed. So how about you do all these jobs? Right. I mean, that's really, let's just call it what it was. And now that's died in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Now I go to downtown Fort Smith, Arkansas, and it's a fucking ghost town. When I was working at that convenience store, we never ran less than 2 clerks. We ran 3 clerks on the weekends. Imagine that at just a fucking gas station. Right. We cashed checks. We cashed for an exorbitant fee. We cashed people's tax return checks. Right. A lot of people came in there with their Social Security checks once a month. I think it was what, $1 per 100, maybe something like that. I don't remember exactly what the fee was. That'd be 1%. So I don't know what it was. It was high, whatever it was, the fee. Still cheaper than some of the other places. Less usurious, if that's the word. Less predatory. So this lady, when she was busting her ass, right? When I was busting my ass, it was at a time in which, yeah, it wasn't a lot of money, but I could go bust my ass 6.5 days a week at the Outback and make 400 cash, right? In 2008, right? 2006, 2007, right before the financial crisis. Okay. The inflation of the bubble, right? Now, at the same time, I had a romantic partner who was doing the exact same thing at a different restaurant. So we were both making right about $800 a week, right? 800 to 900 a week. So when you think about busting my ass for 400 cash, not a lot of money, right? So we still have human beings when they say nobody wants to work. What I would say is, why would I bust my ass for $400? When I and my old lady in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010 were busting our asses for a minimum of 800 to 900 a week liquid, right? That's after taxes. We could rent a nice apartment, an older, rundown, but nice apartment where everything worked for $450 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath in Fort Smith, Arkansas, right? Meaning we made, if you look at every metric of what housing is supposed to cost, we were under 25% of our income, right? We were living comfortably. So add another maximum, and I'm pretty sure that was like they paid a lot of the bills too. It's like maybe we just paid electricity, right? So you're looking at, in a hot summer, a maximum, let's just call it $600 a month, right? For housing costs. That's insane. And it's not that many more years later now, right? So was I willing to work my ass off in a job in which I'm at least expected to bust my ass to some extent? Sure, of course. Why not? Because I still had extra money to, entertain myself, to buy things. Well, as soon as 0809 kicked in, the financial crisis, now I'm realizing I have no extra money, right? All the extra money's gone very quickly, right? And now, well, let's back up a little bit. So let's not make it about me so much. So back to the cultural context of, I never identified with, I need to work hard because of, I was programmed in a certain way culturally, the Cold War, USA versus Russia, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, hard work is a virtue. I never bought into that bullshit, right? I've always been on some level, what the fuck is in it for me, right? What's in it for me? So as long as my whole life I've been this way. As long as it works for me, I'm willing to do it. The moment whatever it is doesn't work for me, I'm out. Right. See ya. I'm gone. I'm not going to continue to show up and slave away if that is not what suits me. Right. That's insane. Like, why would I even do that? Makes no sense. One moment, please. Quick bathroom break. I think I can keep talking, probably. Might be time to grab the apricots while I'm at it. Shout out to the chat. I want my MTV. That's right, DWS. I want my, yeah, I won't even sing it, but yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm on the, hang on. Hang on. Let's get off the clock here. Let's go off duty. Yeah, MTV is an interesting phenomenon. I have a lot to say about that, certainly. I watched MTV, not quite from the very first days, but pretty fucking close. Because of being from bumfuck Arkansas, it took a minute or two to show up in my town, but it showed up fairly early, I would say, overall. But that's easy. I can talk about MTV anytime, so that's always there, certainly. Good to see you, by the way. Hope you're doing well. Trust that you're doing well, I should say. So since I understand inherently that, yeah, I'm willing to work low-level jobs, historically gas station, literally cleaning gas station bathrooms, right? Like I'm always been pretty fucking humble in these ways. Like I'm not, I don't view myself as above a lot of this stuff. I've chosen to do the job, right? It comes along with cleaning the bathroom. Here we go. And it doesn't bother me, whatever. But I'm just not grossed out by stuff like that. I don't think that way. I think, for a lot of people, they're going to have thoughts around, well, what's been going on in that bathroom? It's like, I just don't, it's neither here nor there. It doesn't occur to me. I'm just like, yeah, it's fucking, let's clean it. Let's get it clean and get the fuck out of here. And, if I'm willing to go in there and use it, it's not that much of another step to clean it, from my perspective. It's like, if it's that gross, why am I going in there in the first place? Right. But then some of it, I think, for some folks is they don't want other people to know that they're in there cleaning the bathroom. Like I never gave a fuck about that. It's like, yeah, somebody's got to do it. Why not me? Who cares? But if I had a coworker, I wouldn't let them take advantage of me, and just because they don't want to do it. It's like, yeah, as long as this is, we're all doing our part. That's fine. Um, hang on, I'm distracting myself here. Open the apricots. I meant to buy a new can opener and I forgot. My can opener is not of good quality. It's on the verge of no longer working at all, actually. It's on its last legs. Thank you for your patience. Get my vitamin C among other nutrients today. All right, almost out of here. Almost out of here. I'm gonna have to eat while I'm trying to talk. This is not my favorite, but I think it's gonna have to happen. Uh-oh. Okay.
Well, let's turn the flashers on. All right, we're on the road. But so if you look at what the buying power, even though it appears that the wages have gone up, the wages don't go up over time, right? The buying power, wages do not increase over time when you adjust for inflation. They simply don't, not across the board, right? It's just simply not a thing that happens. So the fact is, I absolutely would not have waited tables. Oh shit. I just simply would not have waited tables for half the money. So if what I could make waiting tables at Outback Steakhouse, and part of my ability to even make 400, probably about 450, let's just call it 450. But part of that was I was literally working 6.5 days a week. 6.5 days a week. And it would have been 7, except we were only open a half day on Sunday. Probably says something about my work ethic, right? But that I would choose to do that. And that was when I was busting my ass in the gym too at the time. And, putting on a lot of muscle mass. I went from actually, that was when I started that job. I was about 165 pounds, and I hit 195 while I was still working there. Pretty impressive overall. It wasn't all muscle, but, most of it. Much of it, I should say. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. So when the lady in the truck stop, the customer is lamenting, nobody wants to work anymore. Well, part of that is it's no longer an economic environment in which this truck stop, which as far as she's concerned, she's not a truck driver. It's just a place she goes in to get Slurpees and, whatever she's buying, and gasoline and whatever, the Little Caesars Express is there, where they make the pizzas and, the little personal pan pizzas and put them in the cardboard. It's just more of a branding thing, I guess. There's not like an actual Little Caesars employee on site or anything, but it's, branding. But, he's saying, I want a pepperoni, and, the lady who's trying to, run the fucking scale, she's the weighmaster, right? When I'm pulling up there trying to use the scale, she's trying to tell me about the truck parking. She's trying to go get the lids because they're out of lids, right? She's trying to run to the back to find out if there's lids, right? Doing all this simultaneously. But the business is no longer busy like it used to be, right? And then the corporate side of things is, over time, the corporation always will always force the employee to become more efficient, right? Meaning yes, the corporation at a certain point would have had 2 clerks. There's 2 registers for a reason, right? But then as soon as the moment comes that they can get by with 1, that's what the corporation does. And the smaller businesses are the same way to some extent. It's just how it works. And, that is the end result of capitalism, right? It always, the moment capitalism can get by with a smaller workforce, that's exactly what it does. So it's, what's the point of honoring, well, nobody wants to work anymore these days. It's like, okay, I understand what that means, but if waiting tables at Outback had paid $225 a week for the amount of work I was doing, I also would not have been willing to work. Not in that job anyway. Do you see what I mean? So now
with how rapidly the cost of everything has increased, and yeah, it will level out over time, most likely to some extent, or maybe not. Just because certain trends have developed doesn't mean that they have to continue with respect to wages and buying power. However, um, you know, if the job I'm doing right now suddenly paid half, I would just wouldn't do the job, or I would do it in a way which would just be like, I would just mostly just live in the truck and make just enough money to live on to feed myself, and then I would just tell the company to fuck off, like be like, yeah, I'm not doing that, and then they could either fire me or not. Oh, you want me to drive 3,000 miles a week? Fuck you. Mhm. So surprise, surprise, I'm doing piecework. They pay me by the mile. Of course they do. Sorry for the chewing noises, but it has to be done. My apologies. So, and this is what I mean, by the way, the individuals that comprise the masses are no longer, and probably haven't been for a very long time. So they're not coming up with their own ideas. The system, Moloch's machine, has packaged an idea called nobody wants to work anymore. And then it's sent that message out to especially the working class, right? As if that's a bad thing. And then what does that mean? Part of it is the idea that I'm supposed to want to work, right? Okay, but what do you mean by work? Because in the present, the corporations have taken over everything to the point that the work functions to make rich people richer. That's what it doesn't. I'm not there to serve this lady as, we're going to give her proper customer service. If the corporation gave a fuck about giving her proper customer service, there would be at least two people working the counter, minimum. Because then we could be team working it. If I'm one of the two clerks, guess what? We probably wouldn't be out of lids, right? And if we were out of lids, I would know it because I would have already tried to stock the motherfucking lids. But see, the corporation is already operating to where this lady is expected to do way too much for the amount of money she's earning, because that's what corporations do. They can't do anything other than seek to be as efficient as possible. All right. Apricots are delicious, by the way. And before I forget, I want to talk about how now there's a theme that people keep saying that food doesn't taste as good, or complaining about the fast food or whatever, and it costs a lot of money and it doesn't even taste good. That's not food. These apricots are fucking delicious. It's because it's real, actual food. When I'm listening to Millennial Steam complain about, he basically said that he may never go to Taco Bell again because he just went there. It tasted like crap. It tasted terrible, and made his stomach hurt. Bro, that ain't food. As far as your body's concerned, you did not eat food. You ate a pile of chemicals. Why are these apricots delicious? A couple of different reasons. One reason, because I've only been eating real food for about 4 years now, my body is not used to artificially over pumped up tastes, right? Part of which is I'm not viewing food and meals as another form of entertainment, meaning, oh, this is my reward and I'm going to have an experience. By the way, a lot of this has to do with marketing, right? And that, you know, part of you choosing Taco Bell and not Jack in the Box or whatever is, or Carl's Jr. or whatever the fuck, McDonald's. You know, part of that is it's a reward, right? You, because you're doing such a great job in your life, right? Because you're awesome. You deserve this. See? But it's sort of, in a way, it's Moloch's machine mocking you because there's nothing at a Taco Bell, there's nothing at a McDonald's that's healthy. And I mean nothing. There's nothing at any of those restaurants that represents actual nutrition to your body. I mean nothing. Now people will say, oh, they have healthy options. No, they don't. They have less unhealthy options. Do you really think that there's nutrients in the so-called healthy options? There's not. There's nutrients in this can of apricots, right? Now, it's not, is it the healthiest food in the world? No. Is it processed? Yeah, to some extent. Right? Has it got chemicals in it? I'm sure. How could it not? But it's mostly real actual food that I'm eating right now. Mostly. It's at least 85% actual food. Minimum. And then also look at what advertising has done to us with fast food and junk food. If I even talk about eating apricots, how quickly will one's mind jump to, well, is he a fruitarian or is he a vegan, right? As if my identity now is going to be based, but there is no identity based on if I go to Casey's, right? I see the Casey sign and go, whatever, you know, hot fucking junk food, you know, under the warmers is available. That ain't food. It's simply not food. You know, I'm certain, I'm convinced if we could take whatever Casey's is selling under the hot lamps, if we could go back in time to caveman days, a caveman would not eat whatever that is. He would smell it and sort of look at it and maybe like start to bite into it, and that'd be it. Because the caveman's body is only ever had real, actual organic food ever, and his body's going to know, and he's in touch with his body, and he's going to be like the chemicals. He's going to be like, wait a minute, and he just the intelligence in his body is not going to eat it. There's no fucking way. So the fact that Millennial Steam is even capable of going to Taco Bell and ordering and eating that food. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, yeah, I went to Taco Bell last week or I went to McDonald's yesterday. That is a direct evidence that your body is not in a proper state of health. Because I have chronic illness. I can't walk into a McDonald's and just order and eat. I'm not able to do that, meaning I'm going to have a certain type, the smell, my body's going to say, wait a minute, danger, Will Robinson, what are you doing to us? The taste is going to be like, well, wait a minute, what is this? Right? Because I've gone 4 years without any of that food. I've gotten closer to what the caveman was. So this is bad, right? This is very bad for the person. That it's, again, there's nothing said about you as a human if you go to McDonald's, if you go to Taco Bell, if you go to Starbucks. The Starbucks, by the way, #2 restaurant in the country by total sales. Because they do also sell food. And coffee's considered food anyway. Food and beverage. Right. And there is, a lot of that is sugar laden with a lot of fat and all that. It's damn near a milkshake, some of that stuff. Who cares? Not my concern. And then also, see, I remember what McDonald's was when I was 10 years old. McDonald's was You go there every once in a while for a treat, right? Every once in a while. You don't go there because we've left the house and it's now 1999 and there's a 5-year old in the back seat of the car, and advertising has intentionally taught the kid how to nag the parent because they figured out that eventually, usually the mom, but sometimes the dad will eventually just give in and they will go eat at McDonald's, right? That wasn't a thing, right? We could nag our parents till the motherfucking cows came home. McDonald's was a treat when I was 10 years old in 1986. It was not yet culturally acceptable to just, oh, we're out and about in town, we're going through the drive-through. Absolutely not. It was still something of a special occasion. So you can see how this sort of has happened bit by bit, the proverbial frog in the pot, the turning up of the heat. So, I can't blame you for the normalization of we just go to fast food, even if we think we're homesteaders growing our own food. It's still acceptable from a person who otherwise eats healthy. You could still go through the drive-through, right? Twice a month, once a week, twice a week, whatever that frequency is. And psychologically, it's like it never happened in a way, right? Because it's not your identity. It's not a political statement, right? It's not people are going to see you eating McDonald's and think, is this a vegan? Is this a fruitarian, right? And the same people who will go through the McDonald's drive-through might tell me that I'm eating a can of beets and it's like, that's bad for you on some level, right? Oh, it's got oxalates. It's got this, maybe there's BPA in the liner. I'm like, yeah, you're eating McDonald's some percentage of the time. Now, I don't mean you, the individual, but so that's the same person, right? Because psychologically, the programming is there that it's neither here nor there to go to Taco Bell or McDonald's. That's just normal. It's not food, y'all. Now, I'm not here to tell you don't eat McDonald's. You'll never hear me say that. What I'm saying is, how can you go to McDonald's and not understand I'm putting what I'm putting in my body does not represent sustenance. It does not represent nutrition. It will only sustain me at the level of calories. That's it. But then also, whatever the addiction is to the chemicals, whatever the addiction is to the experience itself, the anticipation, I'm stressed out and, I deserve a reward. Oh, there's the Golden Arches. Oh, there's Taco Bell, right? The dopamine, the serotonin, whatever chemicals. How can we be so-called truthers talk about the realm and what's going on? Who the fuck knows what's in Taco Bell and McDonald's? That could be anything, right? Who knows what chemicals they're putting in that stuff? And I remember when I quit eating McDonald's, I was homeless, somebody had given me a gift card, and I used to actually like the taste of, 'cause I've never been a McDonald's guy historically. I always liked the fries, and that was about it. Never been a McDonald's guy. Wendy's was more my jam. And when I was in my fast food phase still. And parties to some extent. Burger King even. But I was more of a chicken sandwich guy also, historically. But hang on, I forgot my point, but it'll come to me. Something about sustenance. Shit. Oh, somebody gave me a gift card and I got 2 sausage biscuits. This is before I was on the eggs. That's how long ago this was. 2 sausage biscuits. And I remember eating these biscuits, and then about 2 hours later, I just felt like complete fucking dog shit. I felt fine when I went into the McDonald's and had the 2 biscuits. Felt like ass. I was just like, my stomach hurt. I felt tired. I just felt like trash, dude. And I knew it. I was like, it has to be the biscuits. It cannot be anything but the biscuits. It's the only logical conclusion. I said, no more. I will never. And then if people ever gave me a McDonald's gift card, I'm just like, I would just use it up on coffee. It's like or I just buy somebody else. I'd just be like, hey man, you want a biscuit or whatever? Just, or hey, here's a gift card. Have fun. Pay it forward. Right? No more. No more. Right? It's interesting. I feel fucking great, except for certain aspects of my chronic illnesses. I feel fucking fantastic. Why? Because that's the natural state of the human when they get off of all this garbage food. That's why. How would your life be different if you just said, I'm only going to eat as close as I can get to real food? Because remember, I can't even get all the way to real actual food unless I produce it myself, period. Whatever I'm spending exorbitant amounts of money for that I'm calling real actual food is still not 100% unadulterated, right? It's still got its problems. Some of it's still processed, right? The chocolate, probably considered highly processed, I would imagine. But like, what are we doing to ourselves? And then, and so back to the corporate idea of, so why are people working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and a side hustle, the gig economy? Well, part of it is at this point, people have to either make themselves valuable enough to the corporations that the corporation will pay them a high salary, right? Now, that person's going to need to be able to think and perform, by the way. Are they really going to be able to think properly and perform properly on a diet that is almost completely bereft of actual nutrition, right? Actual vitamins, actual minerals, actual nutrients, Probably not. So, but can a person work 2 fucking McJobs and then maybe a fucking side hustle on the garbage? Yeah, probably. And that's just your normal person nowadays, right? That's just your normal person. So in a way, if a person is going to perform at a level that a corporation would say, we're going to pay you between 180,000, which by the way, not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money. Between 180,000 and maybe 250,000, right? Look at how much that person's going to have to spend just on food to even be able to perform at that level, right? Just for their brain function alone, right? And then, think about your own mind. And when we talk about on here, mind, body, and spirit, if a person, and again, I'm not here to encourage you or motivate you. I have those abilities. I'm a motivationist crap guy, David Goggins, right? Some of this stuff I sort of know within myself at a visceral level. I never had the words, I never had a comprehension or a grasp. If I'm looking to something outside of me to motivate me, that's wrong. That's just an incorrect philosophy, right? I must propel and motivate myself to be ultimately successful based on what are we considering successful, right? Meanwhile, the corporate structure is happy to motivate me externally to be, quote, successful if I'm willing to define success based on what does the realm consider successful. So now we get back to notions of nobody wants to work anymore, which is also to say, success is having a particular income or a particular type of job, right? Well, not necessarily. What I would say is, well, not necessarily. Maybe, perhaps, but not necessarily. And I would say this back to 30 minutes ago or so when I was trying to talk about people are no longer processing. They're not thinking for themselves, and I don't know that they ever completely were, but at this point, especially with the social media and the memes, it's obvious to me that that lady never woke up one day. The customer at the store did not wake up one day and just had her own notion of nobody wants to work anymore. That's an idea that was packaged and delivered to her. And now she's actually repeating it and in some way delivering it to other people, right? Word of mouth now. But she's also reacting in the moment as if that's true, but in a vacuum, as if it's derisive or like it's shameful if I don't want to work, right? Okay, it's like, yes, lady. And I didn't say this to her, but okay, lady, I will see your nobody wants to work anymore, and I'll raise you a I'm happy to work, but only if it works for me. Meaning, yeah, I was happy to wait tables for a max of maybe $500 on my best week, maybe, but it averaged out to around $450 a week after taxes, waiting tables. Cash money though, cash every day. I would not have been willing to do that for half the money, $225. We've cut the buying power in half since the fake pandemic, almost, right? In certain ways, not across the board, but a lot of folks, who were able to scrape by on maybe a side hustle and one full-time job, that's no longer possible, right? It's effectively, and this is while also cutting down their lifestyle. Because before they were more inclined to wasting money, not budgeting, and that's still the case, but people are actually now seeing, okay, they can't just continue to consume like they were, right? It's just not possible. Same thing that happened to me in 08, 09, which is actually what got me into homelessness in the first place. Was I recognized, like, I'm just not willing to continue to pay for an apartment, keep my car running, maintenance, gasoline, and work a job because I only need the car to go to the job. I only need the apartment to be presentable for the job, right? And I only need the job to pay for the apartment and the car. Like it became a pyramid or a triangle. And somehow I just realized in the moment, oh, I can just do without all three. It's like I can accept all three into my life, which I was happy to do when I believed it worked for me. The moment it stopped working for me, I'm out. So really what we're talking about is younger folks recognizing, right? And some of this is they've been propagandized at the level of undermining what used to be viewed as the strength of America, right? They've been propagandized at certain levels of political ideas and communist ideas, collectivist ideas. There's been a lot of undermining of a lot of these concepts. So the young people, they understand that it would be foolish for them to go bust their ass when all that does is make rich people richer. So if the younger person shows up at the truck stop and they get hired, they're going to do the minimum level possible to just not get fired. And depending on who's managing the truck stop, there's just simply not going to hire a younger person unless there just happens to be a go-getter. Guess what? You're not going to be able to keep the go-getter anyway. Somebody's going to come in there and hire them. Some fucking landscaper is going to come in there and notice, hey, here's somebody with half a brain and has some momentum behind them, and they're going to scoop them up, right? So now we have the lady of a certain age in there who's a good worker, right? Why is she a good worker? Because of her program, her now outdated programming, by the way. So you cannot, and this is part of the generation gap. How can we view our own programming? If I'm a boomer, Gen X / boomer by extension, how can I view my indoctrination and connect that to a specific morality, and then look at the younger folks and say they lack morality because they simply, well, it's even worse. And I'm not able to recognize their superiority. See, it's a superiority that some of the millennials and Gen Z and now Gen Alpha will not go for the bullshit that my generation and my parents' generation went for, hook, line, and sinker. They're better than us. And by the way, don't you folks with children want your children to outdo you? I thought that was half the point of having kids, so that they can have a so-called better life. Is it some of that to advance at the level of ideas and culture, right? Or do they need to just keep on slaving away in the metaphorical salt mines because that's what you did, and that's what your daddy did, and that's what his daddy did? Are you fucking crazy, by the way? But then simultaneously, it's a information age. Technology has made life easier. Modern conveniences. The idea that it was originally sold a bill of goods. Oh, you're going to have all this leisure time. Okay, so how does that fit into going off to the motherfucking salt mines? And by the way, now this is the cognitive dissonance. Look at just this is off the charts levels of cognitive dissonance. And can you blame these people? Can you blame them? Can you blame them, right, for not being able to resist a lot of this? This is trauma, right? Fucking dickhead. What a jerk, that trucker. He was going slow as fuck, but somehow he was able to speed up enough that I wasn't able to pass him. But he's got a higher top speed. When I first saw him, he was going like 40. It's crazy. Then he had his light on, and I think he's all over the road, so he's trying to do something, and he probably didn't realize he had slowed down to 50. And then here I come, and he realizes, oh, I'm going 50, and hammers down. Which what would be considered would have been to just keep going 50 until I pass him, and then if he needs to pass me, go for it. So I'll probably just catch right back up to it, most likely. So what I was able to hit the lady with, so then I forget what I was doing yesterday. I think I was like rinsing out my coffee mug or whatever. And I don't probably doing my laundry. I don't know what the fuck I was doing, but so then we part ways, because the cashier shows up and finds just enough lids, finds like half a sleeve of lids in the bag. So now it's Slurpee time, right? Because now it's all complete focus is Slurpee time, which is fine. Who cares? And but I ran back into her as she was leaving, and I said, "Hey, about that, nobody wants to work anymore." I said, "The young folks have figured out that there's no point in killing themselves to make rich people richer." I said, and then it was funny because she did realize in some way, because then she brought it back to how hard she basically was like, because of my age, she was like, yeah, but you certainly would have worked hard growing up or whatever. I was like, oh yeah, I busted my ass. And I said, and you busted your ass, right? But in the part that I'm leaving unsaid is we did that in service of making rich people richer. Right? But see, the young people now know, they're coming into a system in which it's just known that that's to make rich people richer. That is the function of going off to employment. Even richer. While we see our buying power cut almost in half, like seemingly overnight. Right. It's a real thing. So how could I ever be irritated that I'm in a convenience store or a truck stop and there's not enough employees? And part of the reason there's not enough employees is maybe the truck stop would be willing to have two clerks as if they can't find another clerk. Or maybe they scheduled two. Maybe they have to schedule two just to get one to show up. I don't fucking know. I know when I've delivered to these, I delivered to 3 different big box retail stores, and at least one of the stores while I was in the building, because they make you come in the building for safety. That's their policy at the level of their liability, right? That, they're on the walkie-talkie or whatever, and the one manager's talking to the receiving manager, and it's just like, hey, such and such did not show up, right? And it's just normal. It's just normal that some of these people just ain't coming to work, even though they were scheduled, right? And that's just a part of being a manager at a corporation. And there's not like they're fired, right? No call, no show, you're fired necessarily. It's just whoever shows up that day has to get the work done, right? It's just, again, this is just normal. Back in my day, it was like you just had to hope that you did not lose your job on a no call, no show. I remember one time at Walmart in the 90s or 94 probably, could have still been 93, working at the Super Center in Arkansas. No, I wasn't there very long, but at least several months. And they had computerized scheduling, but it was still so new for the pet department. For whatever reason, they never really could get it to work properly. So we just all, once I'd been working there a few weeks, we just kind of all knew who was supposed to work what days and what shifts. So one weekend, I just didn't show up all weekend. And then when they tried to call me on it, I was like, I'm not on the schedule. So like, what did you? So it's like I got them on a technicality, right? So it's like I can't really be in trouble, because I'm technically not on the schedule, right? Little games like that I used to play. So I just didn't feel like coming to work. Part of that though was that even then I could see that, my hard work was never going to be rewarded, you know. So I started out being real gung ho and busted my ass, and then they gave me a 10 cent per hour raise, and I was like, oh, okay, well, clearly this is really no point busting my ass. Like, what's that? $4 a week, right? But remember, in 1993, it wasn't that long ago that 16 more dollars a month would have been that would have paid somebody's bill. Like that would have paid the whatever bill that month. 10 cents an hour for a month would pay your electric bill, not that long ago, right? So this shows you how these progressions within society, and then the fact that so many people identify with that, right? It shows you, and that is, what is that? That's functions as psychological warfare. That is psychological warfare, waged against the populace. Like that's what that is. Whether we interpret it that way or not, it certainly functions on those levels. Psychological warfare. Moloch's machine is never ever not psychologically attacking you. Whether or not you get spiritually attacked, at the level of identifying with if your nature is, the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, true knowledge of self that I've attained or realized. And I'm still training myself to remember that as often as possible, because even I forget from moment to moment at times. And in some ways, that's really all I have to look forward to in life is, what will it be like if I do manage to, effectively always properly identify, with my own true nature, true knowledge of self. It'd be a much different experience, right? And it's getting there. We're not there yet. We're getting close, I would say. I feel like we're getting close. So even if you're not to that point yet, and maybe you're not working towards it, don't care about it, I am addressing an audience of people who are willing to entertain these notions around hell realm and all of this, and literal hell on earth, and that's a lot to cope with. So I do believe it's important to recognize this realm via Moloch's machine. It psychologically attacks you every moment of every day, whether you are aware of it in the moment or not. And that's just at a base level. That's just like built. That's just baked into the cake, right? Baked into the cake. I realized I got a little forceful earlier. Now my fucking gallbladder slash liver region is barking at me a little bit. I'm trying to calm down. Not that I'm uncalm, but chill out again. I get worked up quite easily. So I'm going to roll into this place at 5:15, unless I have to stop again. And depending on what time they start receiving, if they in fact don't start receiving until 8, that'll give me enough time to get enough off duty time that if I need to work later in the day, I'll be able to. But part of me starting out so early, even after waiting to start the day, is it's just like I'm not still going to be working at 10 o'clock tonight. It's not, because then it will fuck up my whole week in a way. It'll fuck my whole schedule, because then that means the next day I'll be starting later than I want to. It could take like a whole week just to get back on my normal schedule, or have to take most of a day off to get back on it. Although I am going to be running out of my 70. I got 20 hours left, I think. And so what I would challenge people with is, to interrogate and really examine as much as possible anything that you hear coming out of your own mouth that you just take as conventional wisdom, common sense, just, oh, nobody wants to work anymore. Okay. Well, okay. That's great. Can we examine that concept? So, number one, let's just say that's true. Why not? Because is it different people, right? But see, because what does that get tied to? Oh, they're lazy. They're lazy. Because if they weren't lazy, they'd surely be down here busting their ass express, or, you know, doing whatever day labor, or, working through the labor ready, or working at Walmart, right? Or working at McDonald's, you know. But that's in a vacuum. So am I really to believe? So if I take that notion in a vacuum, and I will explain logic and reason, and I'll try to do it without being condescending. And look, each one of you, somewhere inside of you has this ability, but then it's like, how does it feel to be pedantic? Because what I'm about to demonstrate is just, it's really on some level nothing other than an exercise in pedantry. Not be. So I'll start with the actual idea, which is let's examine that in a vacuum, meaning, okay, what is implied? Okay, so that's the part that we say out loud, right? Is nobody wants to work anymore. So there's always something in parentheses. And again, there's always exceptions to everything. So there's not always something in parentheses. But typically, there's at least a surface level obvious thing being implied, which is in parentheses, because they're lazy, right? And the way I draw that conclusion is because morally, boomers and prior generations, in the context of the early forms of building up America through capitalism from being a very impoverished country, so much so that apparently just before the American Civil War, your average person in America lived on way less than $2 a day, right? Think about that. And now I understand, well, either way, it doesn't even matter. Just whether that was $2 in 1845 or $2 a day, same, either way, right? Either way, basically $1, so $30 a month per person, on average, right? So there, and realistically, it was like, hey, if you don't work, you don't eat. Meaning, look, almost everybody in society gets out of bed every morning and toils, or there's no food to eat. And maybe we toil and there's still no food to eat. Right. Dust bowl, famine, right? All of these problems, by the way, that technology, at least appears to have solved in some ways, or at least mostly eliminated, such that by the time I came along, most folks were no longer experiencing such levels of deprivation, right? But so that's the context in which so imagine if everybody's out here busting their ass just to maybe eat, really, seriously, to maybe eat. Now, some people, and that's also the concept of middle class. Well, at a certain point, it's like we're middle class, we eat, right? Our kids eat every day, right? And this, it really says a lot about the progression of society over time and just how quickly the expectations are reset. So the idea of nobody wants to work anymore, it's basically like saying, hey, look at all these people who want to lay around and do nothing while we toil, right? And how unfair that is. I agree it's unfair. However, now we've introduced a different idea that also needs to be examined. So now we're going to get into how pedantic and how closely are we going to look into this? Because remember, I'm not going to get very far into this before people start saying, well, you're overthinking. Oh, really? Am I? Or is it that you're feeling some type of way about what I'm saying here? Because if you, the listener, want to be able to utilize logic to the level I'm able to utilize logic, this is what it is, right? This is what it is. I've just begun to peel these onions, right? And I'll have us all crying by the end of it. So let's examine the idea of all these people want to do is lay around and be lazy and luxuriate while the rest of us work. Guess who you just described? Rich folks. There is nobody in society lazier than rich folks, because they're the ones who have the highest ability to do fuck all and still live the life they want to live, right? Because the fact is that people, in order to be so dedicated to being a layabout, it's like, yeah, I might want to be a layabout, but like, do I want to go out in public in motherfucking pajama pants? Right? I mean, seriously. Some people don't give a fuck. I'm a grown ass man. I'm not wandering around town in fucking pajama pants. So if I got to go pick up a shovel and dig in the motherfucking ground all day to buy a fucking pair of pants, guess what? I've dug all motherfucking day before. Right? I chose to do that. I didn't have to. But part of that is you're not going to catch old Benton around town in pajama pants either. And I might not want to depend on just whatever, mom jeans I can get out of the local just giveaway, right? The local giveaway charity, whatever bullshit they're giving away, right? We'll use them for t-shirts maybe. But I got to buy me a pair of pants, partner. And that's $50 probably, 50 to $60. That's, when I was doing day labor, it's $100 a day probably. So I got to work almost, I got to work half a day or more to buy a pair of pants, right? This is a hand-to-mouth existence. This is what we're talking about, By the way, why do I care if somebody wants to lay around and do nothing and be lazy? We don't mind when rich people do it. What do I care if somebody wants to do that and they barely got a pot to piss in? Why do I care, right? Meanwhile, it's completely fine for rich people to do nothing, right? If that's what they like to do, because on some level, them or their ancestors has proven their value to society by having access to large amounts of Federal Reserve notes and resources. Does that make any logical sense? How is that a superior human being? Right? Well, within Moloch's machine, it has to be a superior human being because the only way that the family or the individual was able to access that level of financial resources is by serving Moloch's machine quite skillfully and effectively, by doing Moloch's machines dirty work, right? By serving evil, right, to a high level, intergenerationally, by the way. Completely fine, you know, if Jeff Bezos makes some kids, or maybe already has, if Jeff Bezos's grandchildren don't work a day in their lives, aka lazy, nobody cares because they're driving around in a luxury automobile or they being driven around. They're flying on private jets. They're taking a helicopter to a yacht somewhere, right? They're sipping martinis, right, and being waited on hand and foot, aka the laziest motherfuckers possible. That's okay, but we can't have somebody living in a shack next to us because we're jealous when we leave in the morning and go bust our stupid asses in exchange for a pittance. Oh, like a peasant with a bowl of gruel, right? Oh, thank you, right? Like basically a beggar. You know, thank you for the gruel, right? My daily bread, right? Give us this day our daily bread. You lazy beggar, right? That's the Bible psyop in your ass, in part. But do you see the one thing connects to the next thing that connects to the next thing? And the only way, and again, I'm not bragging here, but the only way to develop intellectually to be able to interface with all of these ideas is to examine each one far beyond the level of, oh, it feels like overthinking, right? That's you. It cannot happen, right? Which is why I start saying a bunch of stuff, and people treat it like, oh yeah, that's just a given. That's common sense. Everybody knows that. No, no, you don't. You're aware of this concept and that concept and this concept. You've never viewed them all together from this perspective, ever, ever, ever. No, you have not. And I know that because I haven't heard anybody else put it together this way. Right. But then people say, oh, well, I watched this channel and they talk about this aspect of what Benton's talking about. And I watch this other channel and they talk about this other aspect. And then I watch this third channel and they talk about the third aspect. So I feel like I relate to each idea. And I say that's an irrational feeling. That does not confer upon you the ability to put all of that together in the moment spontaneously. That's my gift, right? Or my gifts. You're welcome, by the way. You're welcome. Happy to be of service. It is a little annoying knowing people just believe that they're able to do what I can do. Oh, you know you're not. Not until you demonstrate it. And you can do. So it's a tie anyway. You're probably better than me in a lot of things. The listener. So specific with the pronoun, sir. Now I'm going third person. And then I do believe a lot of what I'm talking about here is the biblical concept of and harmless as doves, right? Because the more I'm able to view all of these concepts in a way that serves me, right? Because it doesn't serve me to go out into this realm on a daily basis and be disgruntled and annoyed with my fellow suffering humans because I view them as lazy and they slave away to make rich people richer so that Jeff Bezos' grandkids can have a life of luxury. But it's not okay if the bozo next door wants to mob around in pajama pants and spend all his disposable income on Schlitz and Marlboros or whatever, or not even that. Whatever the cheapest fucking cigars are. Little cigars, because the tax on cigars is much lower than the tax on cigarettes. So it looks kind of like a cigarette, but it's got, even worse tobacco in it, and whatever. So he's drinking Steel Reserve and buying the cheapest little cigars, right? It's legally a cigar, even though it looks like a pack of cigarettes, right? And mobbing around in pajama pants and, maybe doing day labor here and there, right? And probably getting a tiny little check, right? Meanwhile, you hardworking taxpayers, which, by the way, I was looking at that debt clock or whatever. There's how many taxpayers are in this country? Like 100. I think it was just going from memory, like 160 million or something. Maybe less than that out of 340 million Americans or whatever, plus illegals, whatever that number is. And then to realize, okay, there's I'll just call it 150 million. There's 150 million people dumb enough to go off and pay into a tax system, a federal income tax system that gives the majority of that tax it collects to people who are so wealthy that 10 generations from now, their offspring will never have to work, never have to do anything they don't want to do. Right. Whereas, yeah, the bozo in the pajama pants in the shack next door probably at some point has to go do something. Right. I mean, what the hell is Jeff Bezos' offspring going to be expected to do 8 generations from now? Old money, by the way, by then. Right. Old money. So how can both things be true? How can it be okay for the rich people to be the laziest? Right. Because how can I be jealous of a rich? I can't be jealous of those people. Right. And it's also based on the notion that any of us could reach that could rise to those heights. No, you can't. It's not possible for you ever to get that wealthy. Sorry, it's not. Can't happen. It cannot happen. What's up, Chow Fun? I see you down there. And see, it's been 15 minutes of me trying to examine something that people will just repeat to each other as if it's just neither here nor there. Oh, nobody wants to work anymore. Okay, why not? And if I could probably just ask that lady, okay, oh yeah, why not? And just watch your eyeballs get big. And why don't they want to work? What's being implied? And is that even consistent with reality? Because remember, if it doesn't work for me, I'm not doing it. Meaning, I would not have waited tables for 3 straight years for Outback Steakhouse for half of what they paid me. Meaning, I would not go right now and work the next 3 years for Outback Steakhouse, because whatever they're paying, it's effectively half of what I would have been making. Meaning, I can't go find a romantic partner and then they wait tables and I wait tables and we can save up our money and rent an apartment and pay first month's and last month's and then pay for this apartment with less than 25% of our combined incomes. That's over. And neither one of us has a side hustle or a gig or is in the gig economy. All right. That's over. That's dead. So the moment it doesn't work for me, I'm out. And if you are an American and that's not your strategy, why not? What the fuck is wrong with you? How has Moloch's machine convinced you to do things that are contrary to your own best interest? How has this happened? God bless Gen Z for not swallowing this corporate notion of slaving away to make rich people richer. God bless them. They're better than us, Gen X. They're better than us, boomers, in that way. Guess what? The young generation is always better than the older generations in certain ways. In certain ways. By the way, it's almost always going to be in a way that the older generation does not honor or uphold, right? And kind of probably thinks is bullshit on some level. How dare we slaved away for corporations? How dare they not slave away for corporations? Right. But it's like, well, wait a minute. Don't I have logic enough to realize that if I was 20 years old in 2025, I would probably be just like all the other 20-year-olds and be like, yeah, I'm also not into this. I'm also not into this. I mean, to me, that makes logical sense. But then the system, Moloch's machine, has indoctrinated us to view it as a moral imperative. Why? Why is it viewed morally? Because when my generation and my parents' generation was indoctrinated, it was done via an us versus them, America versus USSA. I'm sorry, USSA. USA versus USSR. Right? We got to beat the Ruskies. Right? Got to beat them Russians. Got to beat them Russians. So it became moral to go work hard to serve capitalism because everybody knew that Russia forced people to work hard to support communism. So America is morally superior because in America, we don't force you to work hard to honor capitalism. It's your choice. And by the way, look at the everything society has to offer. You get to choose between VHS and Betamax, right? You get to go to the movie theater. You know, you get to have cable television, right? Here's the Game Boy. You know, here's NES and Game Boy, and then or you can have Sega Master System, right? So isn't life wonderful? Look at the modern conveniences. And we don't even make you do this. Meanwhile, in communism, they force everybody to bust their ass without these labor laws, like in America. And, you know, they get like maybe they can buy one type of ridiculous car, maybe, right? If the government allows it, right? And then that was true to an extent. However, do you see that allowed people to begin to morally identify with, oh, we're going to choose to outwork the Ruskies? So is it a coincidence that fast forward to 2025 and now it's, hey, you're already working a full-time job, at least a part-time job, if not two full-time jobs and a gig, right? And oh, you're telling me that you can't pay your bills. I guess you better work harder. Because that's the idea that the upper classes, right, the actual rich people would just say, oh, work harder, right? Meanwhile, they're the ultimate work smarter, not harder, meaning figure out how to become so wealthy that we sit around and passively receive income so that we don't actually do anything, also known as lazy. Because if laziness was immoral, then it wouldn't be, why would it be viewed as we need to get rich and everybody in America wants to get rich to do what? Oh, now we get to do whatever we want. Well, what if what I want to do is I just want to do nothing? Isn't that laziness? Oh, but it's okay because you went out here and you gave enough value to capitalism that capitalism has rewarded you with passive streams of income. And now even your offspring, right? But then that's only, is that even moral? Well, in the context of Moloch's machine, of course it's moral. Because remember, Moloch's machine is, as perfectly as possible, has undertaken the business of, you know, proving evil to be the valid concept and not love. To prove evil, to prove the validity of it, the potential validity of evil in its ability, its possible ability to triumph over love. Right. So that's why people view this the way they view it. And that's the reason for people choosing to say nobody wants to work anymore. Right. By the way, if people think society will ever be reformed or fixed where a person can work 40 hours and support a family, if a person is hallucinating and out of touch so much to believe that will ever be a thing again, because it surely won't, guess what would make it possible? if everybody stayed the fuck home long enough. Meaning, if everybody who's not wealthy said, hey, government, hey, rich folks, we're taking 2 months off, and here's your to-do list while we're away. We're taking a 2-month vacation. Here's your to-do list. We're going to check back with you in 60 days. And if you're not done, we're probably taking another 60 days off. And see how quick that shit gets done. And just watch the fucking clown show. Right? But can that ever happen? See, Moloch's machine is designed that people can't stay at home because, number one, they can't worship, then they can't participate in worship, the national religion being consumerism. They can't worship the almighty dollar. They can't worship consumerism, right? So their religion is gone. Their God being money, right? And they do worship. And then also, if they really believe that to not work a job is immoral, they can't stay at home for 60 days. Because now it's like, well, and some people wouldn't know what to do with themselves. Now, what we saw during the pandemic was people had to figure it the fuck out during the fake pandemic, right? And what did some people do? They fucking moved across the country because they're like, well, I can't be confined to my goddamn living quarters. Seriously. So a lot of them just said, fuck it, we're out, and just left wherever they lived and went somewhere where they were at least allowed out of their homes. That's how strong that desire is, right? Oh, shit. I think I'm speeding. Maybe not. Maybe I'm not. Thought I was. And what are my chances? And I'm only talking about the intellect here. Now, the mind and the body, the spirit and the body are necessary to do what? To be able to cope in the moment with how do I feel, and my own consternation and gnashing of teeth around, well, why are things this way? My own propensity to loop into problem solving, right? To even develop myself, mind, body, and spirit, to even be able to interface with all of these ideas and not get stressed out, not be tense, right? Not need to go eat fast food just to relieve some stress, right? Seriously, to still be able to be calm, cool, and collected at the level of my physiology and spiritually, right? Just to be able to even think this way. And make no mistake, regardless of what your talents and abilities are, every single one of you is coping with your own versions of what I'm talking about, right? So whatever personal development is required to even be able to deal with this realm on this realm's terms on a daily basis, moment to moment, because you are psychologically attacked pretty much every moment of every day, right? And hell, even in your dreams to some extent, right? Like, what even is this? Which I would say says a lot about how the realm itself views how strong and powerful not people are, not the masses are, because this idea of power to the people have no power. Each individual person that makes up the people has may very well have effectively unlimited power within themselves if they are willing to what? Exercise their own power within their own spheres of influence. If they're willing to get their own houses in order. And most ain't, and that's okay. Most are not. And that's fine. And somebody commenting on Mammon down there, just out. And I can't see it, of course, because StreamYard is garbage, but I see the word Mammon. And the reality is, it's not possible to serve this realm at the level of consumerism, employment, and the money system without serving in some form money as one's master, right? So back to the biblical concept of one is not capable to serve the most super intelligent force of love possible and serve money, which is what that really means business, right? And again, I've talked about everything in America is a business, including me, right? But I foresee in the very near future that I will be leaving, perhaps forever. I will be leaving this working world of overtly operating as a business via employment, right? Now, I will still passively be participating because it's just simply most likely not possible, to just completely go away and never ever, you know, participate in anything that has to do with business again, right? It's probably not possible, and it doesn't even to me. It's not important, but I can see spiritually in the near future, I am going to reach the point that my development, mind, body, and spirit is going to be held back based on my own participation in money, being able to buy things, being able to have internet service on a phone, all of my attachments around, having a vehicle, right? Having a driver's license, having ID, I have a copy of my birth certificate on me, my social security card, right? And now that I'm no longer I'm getting to the point where I'm not able to fear, like, well, what if I didn't have a social security card? What if I didn't have a driver's license? What if I didn't have a copy of my birth certificate? What if I wasn't employable, right? Well, that would mean that I would not be able, generally speaking, to go out here and actively support business through not consuming, but through employment, right? And at what point, and now we get to the biblical concept of the mark of the beast, and at what point in my lifetime may it be effectively impossible to actually engage in proper society at the level of buying and selling? Right. It's almost there in some ways. Pretty quickly, it could become possible where, if I'm not able to buy and sell through my phone or through, pay cards or whatever, in some ways, it's already not able to buy and sell in some way. And of course, I'm sure some version of that, like the whatever the proles in 1984 or whatever their black market, all of that was technically against the law, by the way. If anybody remembers 1984, the novel, when Winston, was unable to find, he could not get his hands on razors to shave his face, but then the societal expectation is he has to show up clean shaven every day. And it's just part of his daily life is it's just, am I bold enough to ask this particular person, hey, you got any extra razors? And they're like, but everybody knows if they do, they're hoarding them anyway. So eventually the person's going to be forced to break the law just to meet the societal expectation around shaving of one's face, or at least the males, right? And maybe the females are shaving, whatever they're shaving. And so now, at some point, Winston's, who's, by the way, a party member, so, he's got to remain in good standing with the party, so he can't let anybody find out that he's going to the black market to buy razors. Like, that's, society's, is that, it's going to be there, I would imagine, quite probably. Yeah, pull on up there, Bubba, even though you can't go on, you can't even turn. But yeah, pull on up there and get where I can't see. Good thing I'm up here in a big rig. Oh yeah, I think I know which. Do I know which truck stop it is? I think they have an Amazon locker here, maybe. I'm not sure though. I'm getting hungry, man. Getting hungrier and hungrier every day. That's probably further evidence of my digestive system continuing to heal. And some of the damage it's healing from is from
I mean, literally, some of that's from, when I was 12 years old, eating just insane amounts of junk food on a daily basis. And I've always been able to eat a fucking lot of food in spite of being thin. Now I can't even get through here because these drivers have parked in the entrance and exit. All right, got a driver coming in through the outdoor, so we'll trying to see based on his trailer which way he's going. If I was a dick, I would have gotten his way, but I'm not going to do that to him because sometimes I go in backwards too, or out backwards, however you want to say that. That's the golden rule, by the way. Do unto others. Do unto others. Well, and I would take it a step further. If Just Out is saying Mammon is running the show in America, not Moloch, well, you're wrong. You're wrong, Just Out. You don't want to believe that Moloch's running the show, probably because you believe yourself to be a Christian, whatever that means, and you've been told that God's in control, meaning the Most High, meaning the most super intelligent force of love possible. So you're actually dead fucking wrong, sir. You're dead wrong. So I hate to break it to you, but you're wrong. And why are you wrong? Because you've been indoctrinated in such a way that you're not able to think for yourself and face reality properly, right? And it's not your fault. This was done to you, and it was done to you at the level of mind control, right? Now, how do I know this was done to you at the level of mind control? Because I had the distinct honor, and not honor, but I had a unique way of being raised in that I was mind controlled by a religion called the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? It's basically like Scientology level mind control to a child, by the way. And so I am much more adept than you at dealing with the realm day to day based on my own ability to detect, uninstall, and transcend my own mind control, right? And I want to make it clear at a certain point in my 30s, I became aware that I was not completely sure in my own mind what was my personality and what was the mind control of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, no bullshit. I didn't know. So much so that I'm one of the most introverted people in society, and I actually believed that I was, in fact, one of the most extroverted. And that was based on a cult. We're not we're not leaving a review of Benson's discourse here. So it's on you to make your own argument for why I'm wrong. And I know you can't do that because I have so closely examined all of the arguments I'm making. And in examining those arguments, I've also examined all potential counter arguments. So what you're asserting, Just Out, is too weak of a position to be sustained, right? So you're stating an opinion that, okay, let's just call it what it is. Your mouth is writing a check that your ass can't cash, right?
Mm. But see, in a tough guy sense, if see, I have these, and I can't speak for you, but I suspect you have a macho way of identifying, right? I also have that macho identification, but mine has a lot more to, outside of sports when I was a child and a young person. Mine is way more tied into my intellectual abilities, right? So metaphorically, you are now entering into a realm in which if we're going to, me and you are going to have a metaphorical pugilism, I'm going to knock the fuck out of you because I've already looked at you and sized you up, right? I've already, I know what I can do. I know exactly what you can do, and you're about to get knocked the fuck out, right? So part of all of this is in that environment, I never go into a potential fisticuffs anything short of the strongest possible position, right? Meaning I would never assert what I'm asserting unless I'm coming from the strongest possible position because I've got to put my name on it. Meaning, if me and you are on the same job and we got to go duke it out back of the shop, I'm never ever going to put myself in a position of having to duke it out behind the shop unless I'm almost certain I'm going to win. And I'm telling you, you're coming from such a weak position here. You have no chance if we actually were to go to head. Zero chance. So the room for growth for Just Out is to say, okay, why am I motivated? What is motivating me within me to react this way to what Benton's saying? Because your response is lacking, right? So, and number two, who does it serve, right? Who is served? Who or what is served by you reacting this way? You're actually serving Moloch's machine. I hate to break it to you, because Moloch's machine, the Most High God, right? If we're willing to view this in a Christian sense, I'm going to tell you, I won't speak for the Most High, but the Most High did not do this to you, right? The proposition, the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, is not capable of doing this to you, right? The antithesis of that force has built a machine called society that I'm calling Moloch's machine, right? And it designed your psychology. I hate to break it to you. Before you were born, it had already designed the psychology it was going to put into your head when you were 2 years old, right? And Moloch's machine designed and installed your psychology to serve Moloch's machine up to and including the way you're reacting to my discourse. So you can never defeat my intellectual assertions solely based on you don't even know that you're operating based on what Moloch's machine is programmed you and is operating you. You're literally, think about this. You are responding to me based on being operated by Moloch's machine. Moloch's machine is so in your mind that it's actually attempting to bring you against me in this moment because you think your opinion of my discourse has relevance. Why do you think that? Because you have a psychology
Well, shit, we lost connection. Oh well, it's probably just as well. I was getting borderline insulting, but yeah. So part of being able to have these conversations is to understand that when I make an assertion, I'm putting myself in a position where I'm going to have to defend certain. There's going to be certain. Basically, in a debate, my opponent can force me to defend specific positions. So I'm not going to make an assertion until I've observed what my opponent could potentially force me into, right? At those levels. Hang on, let me check the fifth wheel. Actually, I'm not even going to do that. We're gonna YOLO it. We're gonna YOLO it. I got to get back on the road. I forgot that I'm on a little bit of a schedule here. Yeah, it says I'm going to get there by 5:30. That'll be early enough. So we need to roll out. I think I might do what that other guy did. Go out through the indoor, maybe. This is probably a clusterfuck. We can't make that U-turn, though. Uh-oh. Fraught with peril. Okay, I think there's just enough room to drive in or out of this place. This is crazy, man. Absolute insanity that people do this. I could never just like almost block the fucking main thoroughfare and then get a good night's sleep. And some of the truck stops just will not let people do this, but park everywhere. This is nuts. What up, Jay? Good to see you. Oh, I accidentally I accidentally clicked the link down there. Oh, I see the StreamYard referral. Give him a little air horn on the way out. Being in the way. How rude of them, of course. And that's what I like about sports back in the day was if I showed up to the basketball court, like I had to have a certain level of skill to play in the game, right? Or to be able to be competitive in the game. And what we see now is, people who, before the rise of social media and before the internet and before these forms of communication became popular, see, what we have is a whole bunch of people that back in the day were not into reading books, were not into taking in information, and were not necessarily inclined to doing well in a scholastic sense, right? Who are now on the internet, and because you're able to come on here and you have an opinion, you're able to just assume that you're able to perform on a level like I can perform on. But it's like, I've been doing this my whole life to some extent. And sometimes I'm around people who are so good that I can't say anything, meaning sometimes I have to just be quiet and listen. Like, such as maybe I'm in Berkeley, California, and I just happen to be seated at a table somewhere and there's like some high level fucking discussion going on. I can't add to it, and if I do feel like it's my turn to interject, I'm probably going to make myself appear foolish. Very quickly, right? Just like in the sports or basketball example, if I go down to the basketball court, but I haven't been practicing enough yet, and now the pickup game starts, how quickly am I going to appear foolish, right?
But then what is it about people that think they can go on YouTube or these panels or a channel like mine and just without the background, without ever developing yourself, well, now you can go up against somebody like me? No, you can't. You're just not ever going to be able to until you develop, right? And that's not me being a dick. I'm supposed to make you look foolish, right? I'm supposed to tell you, well, actually, I hate to break it to you, but you got a lot to work to do until the day comes that you can challenge me in any of these arenas. And by the way, back to what I told Kim before the storm, it's not like I'm the final boss of this shit. Like, you can't get past me. And you know, that's a you problem, right? So what are we doing? And then, but again, the valuable part is not me taking you to task or beating you up. The valuable part is great. I'm glad you said that you don't consider it Moloch's machine. Great. Why don't you think so? Meaning, don't defend your position. Look inside yourself and try to figure out, why do I believe that? See, now we're on the belief system. And this is something I've been talking about recently. Now we found something valuable. Why do you believe that? Or more correctly, why are you unwilling, if in fact I'm correct and you're not, why are you unwilling to go along with what I'm asserting? Why are you reflexively having this resistance? What's to what end? Who or what is served, and does it serve you, right? And if it serves you, how does it serve you? Because maybe it serves you, but it only serves you at the level of being able to get along with your peers and your family and your local community, because the people in your local community and your peer groups will probably just say, oh yeah, God's in control. You know, Jesus take the wheel style, right? Well, wait a minute, question everything, but don't question the possibility that Moloch's running the show. Don't question that possibility, right? Or more correctly, don't even be willing to consider the possibility that that's the case, right? So much so that we're willing to simultaneously listen to Benton, but then we'll tell him he's wrong. We'll try to tell him he's wrong when he makes specific points. Because why? Because that threatens your default belief system, potentially. Because that potentially threatens your default belief system. Well, what's that have to do with me? That you are operating potentially based on how you've been indoctrinated at a default level to serve Moloch's machine, by the way. Serve Moloch's machine. I might be going the wrong way here. I can't really tell, honestly. No, I think we're going the right way. There's so many roads, I think I'm on the wrong road, but honestly can't tell. We're going the correct direction. So it might be multiple roads go to the same place. That's also possible. Yeah, that's what it is. Multiple paths to the same outcome. And by the way, I don't suffer from if just out is still operating based on his default programming, at least in part, which is fine, but I don't suffer for that. And so now we're back to the holy individual experience. I don't suffer anything more than annoyance. He suffers for that because he's not actually able to live in reality. I don't suffer, he suffers. And again, my basis for compassion, now that I've made my intellectual points, my basis for compassion is I can see how miserable it would be to go back to operating based on my default belief system. that I never consented to, that was installed within me, right, by this system of things. And the fact is, my own parents, my own grandparents, my own immediate family all participated. And that's where it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people to face the reality that, yeah, the fact is, some of these people who you might want to believe had your best interest at heart to guide you properly either lack the ability or just for their own purposes went along with a bunch of bullshit, right? So further incentivizing people to view America and business and the money system and the banking system and the government as, well, God's in control of all this, right? It's not Moloch in charge. No, it's worse than Moloch in charge. Moloch's only in charge through the subversion of the creative force of the individuals who comprise the masses of people. It's worse. It's worse than God not being, than the Most High not being in control. And in fact, guess what? The most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level won't dominate. It won't be authoritarian, right? It doesn't know what that means. It doesn't know how to treat you in an authoritarian manner. It doesn't know how to make you eat your vegetables or else, right? It doesn't know how to force you to do things that it may very well believe are in your best interest. Your parents knew how to do that. Your grandparents knew how to do that. Their parents knew how to do that. Your peer group knew how to do that. Your fucking church knew how to do that. And your school knew how to do that. And it all did that in service of what? The almighty dollar, capitalism, and business. And that's why everything in America is a business. But who wants to face the reality that, wow, the people who may very well have loved me the most when I was a tender little child did all this to me? Yeah, they did. And guess what? It was done to them. And the people that did it to them did it to, see what I'm saying? Like, look at how it just goes back and goes back and goes back. See, you don't have to go back that it just, and on and on and on. And guess what? If you have children, you've done it to them. You've most likely done it to them. And that's why at a certain point, I looked at my parents and my sisters who all had kids and have all perpetuated the cycle that I was born into. And I said, you know what? I broke the cycle, meaning I did not bring any new people into this and continue to perpetuate these cycles upon them, meaning I'm better than y'all in a way. And that's okay. It's not bragging if you can back it up. Hashtag GOML, right? It's okay. I forgive you if you ever were willing to seek my forgiveness. I would forgive you for that because my essence is only capable of forgiving. So when the Bible talks about forgiveness, is it approaching it backwards? It's not to forgive people. It's to be so identified with my own essence inside of myself that, well, what I am is not capable of anything but forgiveness, right? I'm only able to forgive, meaning when I'm identified within myself based on my own nature, which is one with the most super intelligent force of love possible. So here's the problem, just out, or it's not a problem for me. The problem for you is if I am 100% convinced that my true nature, true knowledge of self is one with the most super intelligent force of love possible, my essence is not capable of creating and operating this realm, right? Meaning what I am cannot make this on an ongoing basis and continue to operate it. Only Moloch or the antithesis or Satan or the lowest levels of evil and the lowest forms of vibration. See? Right. So don't get it twisted. Right. But my basis of compassion is I became aware In my 30s, I became aware. Okay, what do I believe? Because again, question everything. Everything means everything to a person who has undiagnosed fake autism. It doesn't mean, well, question almost everything, but don't question your own belief system. So at a certain point, it was like, okay, I have a belief system. Okay, what are my beliefs? And I realized, well, what I act upon is actually different than what I think I believe. That's actually two different belief systems. Okay. But then, so what I'm acting upon, why do I believe those things? Oh, look, it turns out that belief system was installed by the system itself to serve the system. And then selfishly, I asked, how does this serve me? Right. How does all of this serve me? Or even does it serve me? Right. And then what is the shame and guilt around? What levels of guilt and shame will the person even experience if they have the audacity to say, well, my parents and their parents and my church and the school and the government allowed me to be indoctrinated by all these beliefs. How shameful is it that I'm so ungrateful to even be willing to question the notion that it's even possible that all of that was done to me to serve evil and wickedness potentially. So you're coming at me just out based on the impossibility of what I'm asserting. Do you even understand that? Do you even understand that about yourself? That you're actually not even able to approach the problem properly based on how mind controlled and indoctrinated you've been. Like, are you even aware of that? Right. Probably not. Or you wouldn't be coming at me like that. So it's like you're at step Z. This is what I told my dad. And look, if it offends you, that's fine. I told my dad at a certain point because he began to imply that I thought myself to be so spiritually evolved and advanced, when really he was feeling some type of way based on my abilities, right? And what I told him was, look, man, if I'm at a 1 out of 10 and you're at a 0, I said, you can't divide by 0. So yeah, I can see why from your perspective, you think I'm putting myself up as like I've attained all of this development. Meanwhile, if you're at a motherfucking 0, you can't divide by 0. If I'm barely scratched the surface of spiritual development and you've done nothing just out, then what are we even talking about here? It's like you got to get past step 0, buddy, or not. By the way, I have no problem with you staying at step 0. But if you think you can be at step 0 and have anything to say to me, good luck. Good luck with all of that, buddy. You're not going to get very far. But we're now in an arena, we're in an information age with social media platforms where you always get to put your 2 cents in and have it be valid. Absolutely not. Get that weak shit out of here. Just like if I was on the playground, at a certain point, and you were new to the game, and I was guarding you, and you think you can put a shot up in my face, you're going to see, oh, Benton just threw my shit into the goddamn, he just took my shit and threw it into the playground. Meaning I just blocked your shit, partner. Now what? Now what? Because that's what's supposed to happen when you come in with that weak shit. We're not supposed, but we're now in a society that you yourself would recognize based on what your ancestors taught you, based on common sense and conventional wisdom. Oh, it's become safe spaces, and we've nerfed society. Yeah, and guess what? That's been done to you, so you actually think you get to bring your weak shit into my house. Yeah, you can, and I'm going to send you packing. I'm going to metaphorically block your shit, and I'm going to throw your shit into the stands. Partner, get that weak shit out of here, buddy. And that's only going to happen 2 or 3 times, and you're not going to come back until you can play in a game with me. And I'm not, and yeah, I'll still every once in a while block one of your shots, but guess what? You're also going to drive to the hoop and make a layup against me every once in a while. You're going to bring your game up, right? But in this ethereal realm, I can't make you take an L. See, on the playground, you have no choice. In the pickup basketball game, everybody can just see that you took an L. You're going to look foolish if you try to say, well, actually, I did pretty good. Well, actually, it wasn't quite the L that you're saying. No, we all just saw the L. But in this arena, you're still free to create a false reality for yourself and inhabit that false reality. And I can't ever force you out of that. But, I'm not ever going to just be like, okay, man, yeah, you did good. Well done, just out. You're so fucking, you're so accomplished and intelligent that, I just think all day, every day for years. And you're so fucking great. You can immediately just tell me why I'm wrong. By the way, which is not masculine. I won't say like a woman. I'll say in an unmasculine fashion, you can always tell me why I'm wrong. Right. Good on you. Right. Well done. Because what's masculine is to say, okay, perhaps I'm mistaken here. Let me verify if I've done a good job with my thought process. Right. Which is also, we're doing a job, we're on a job site. I'm the supervisor, and you've chosen to go out here and do a job. And instead of double checking your own work, you're giving me something to inspect. And now I'm telling you, well, that's not going to meet muster. And you're trying to tell me, you're going to try to tell me why it's actually good enough. But wait a minute, I'm the one who examines it and decides if it's good enough. And I'm here to tell you, the job you're doing will never represent the possible job. So now the possible job that's going to be acceptable. So I'm telling you that if you're going to continue to try to do this same job, I'm helpfully pointing out to you, come back with something better, please. But not to benefit me, to benefit you. I don't need you to do better. I want you to do better. I don't benefit from you doing better. And in fact, I don't suffer from you putting on this terrible performance. Right. Because you don't know that you can't just say one statement to me in this context, shoot from the hip, and just get away with it. Because other people will let you get away with that weak shit because they're either don't care enough to correct you or they just don't have the ability to block your shit. Right. So when I was in the freshman dorm, University of Arkansas, and I had this real, it was a real cocky black, right, in my dorm, didn't know that this is a Pine Bluff white boy, right, and me and him never got along, and I finally got him on the court. Finally got him on the court. His name was Ponce de Leon Clark, and he was a better athlete than me. But basketball was not his sport. His sport was football. He was going to walk on with the Razorbacks, and probably did, because he was definitely a quite the specimen as just a pure athlete. Not enough to get a scholarship, but compared to a white boy, certainly. And I, couldn't have. It's not like I had the ability to walk onto the basketball team. And well, maybe, but that's not even the point. Probably not. Maybe could have developed myself into that, but probably not. And so I finally got him on the court, which was not my plan, right? So we're playing half court, choose up sides. I think probably 3-on-3. I said I got punts because I know the first time he goes up for a jumper, I'm going up right there with him and I'm blocking his shit, which is exactly what happened. And I just looked at him like, yep, that's right, partner. You didn't even know what game you was playing. Because in your life, you've been guarded by a 5'10" scrawny white boy before, but you've never been guarded by a scrawny 5'10" white boy that can jump, that can go up with you when you jump to shoot your jumper, that can go right up with you and block your shit. You've never met him, sir. So I understand why you could not foresee this. You ain't never met that. I am that one, see? So it's time to adapt what you consider. It's time to update what you consider possible. See, and it ain't my fault that you're coming in here with some weak shit. It's my job to say, get that weak shit out of here, right? But I'm helpfully pointing out to you why you, where to start if you want to fix this. Just like I was in a game one time, a half court 2-on-2, and I got tired of the person that never could figure out that I'm going to fake right and then go left every single time I take the ball out and drive past them and make a layup. And I got sick of them slapping me in my lower back area. And I finally just said, this is what I'm about to do every single time until you stop it. Please stop. Please stop slapping me in my lower back after I go around you and make a layup. And he still couldn't stop me because my ability was so much beyond his, right? There's nothing he could do, even though I told him what I was going to do to him. Couldn't do anything about it. And I could, you know, if he devoted himself to becoming good at basketball, I could have said, okay, here's what you need to work on. And then after he got good at that thing, I could have said, okay, here's what else you need to work on. Right. And on and on and on. That's how much above your level I am. I'm able to, step by step, I can show you what to change to eventually get really good at what we're doing here. But you have an opinion, right? And on some level, you will always believe that your opinion is just as valid as mine. Well, not if there's a metaphorical version of a proving ground or a pickup basketball game and a basketball court, right? Not if that exists. See, because I used to go to, I had a roommate, by the way. I had a roommate that he used to come home. This is sophomore year. He used to come home and brag about all the 3-pointers he made down at the intramural, you know, the intramural facility, the full court basketball pickup game. And I used to listen to this and hear this. And so he had an opinion that he was really good at basketball and he really liked basketball. He just enjoyed it. And so, and I was a bit of a night owl back then. So we used to go out and play one-on-one basketball at midnight because you can't really get a basketball game at midnight. He never beat me a single time one-on-one, but he had an opinion that he was good at basketball. See, it's like, that's okay to have that opinion, but when we go to this court, I'm going to beat you every single motherfucking time because that's who Benton is. Benton first develops himself, then competes. Benton is never going to just, oh, well, now we go out and compete in the arena of ideas. Here I am and I have ideas. Absolutely not. Because I'm not able to be out here with weak ideas. I'm not able to be out here with weak ideas. Just like I wasn't able to be on the basketball court and not be a strong competitor. Right. I'm not able to do that. And so whoever my roommate was, but 6'1", by the way, bigger than me, you know, larger fella than me in some ways. Had bigger hands though. Funny how that works. Bigger hands and feet. But, you know, and I was a better athlete and had worked on my game more. But, you know, here's somebody who probably just worked on the things he enjoyed, right? He probably mostly worked on his ability to shoot and to get open coming off of screens and then to get past the ball and shoot a jumper. That's great. But none of those skills is what will beat me in a game on one-on-one. When I started out as a basketball player, I first developed my abilities to play defense, to rebound, and to pass the ball because I knew that was what would make me valuable when I did get in the game. Right. That's what would be my value to the team. It was not my ability to shoot the basketball. It was not my ability to score the basketball. Initially, it was going to be my ability to go out and do the things that nobody else wanted to do, rebound and play defense. So surprise, surprise, I was really good at shot blocking for somebody of my size because I worked as hard as I could at it. Right. The fact that anybody could pick up a basketball and shoot at the hoop, meaning that's the same. That's the level of that's where we're at with anybody can have an opinion. So what? If we actually play a game and I'm guarding you, you're going to see that I can block your shit. So what is the relevance that you have an opinion, meaning you can shoot your shot? Yeah, I can block it. So what? Get that weak shit out of here. Pretty please with sugar on top. Get that weak shit out of here. Right. For your own sake. I'm by the way, I don't benefit for you getting your shit together. It's neither here nor there for me. You know, I didn't suffer because my roommate and also was unwilling to do whatever it would have taken to go to the next level and be able to beat me some of the time. Right. He could have said, well, why do I lose every single pickup game to Benton? Right. Why is Benton beating me? And hell, if he would have asked me, I would have told him. I would have said, well, number one, you can't get a rebound. Number two, yeah, you're a way better shooter than I am, but you're not. You do miss some of the time, and every single time you miss, I get every fucking rebound. Right. So that's the main reason. And number two, I challenge your shot enough that you are shooting at a lower percentage than you're shooting at the fucking intramural because they're not motivated enough to D you up. I'm gonna D you up as hard as I can every single time. I'm never not gonna meet you with a maximum effort on defense ever. So part of it is tenacity and intensity, right? So he would need to. And by the way, here's my signature move. You must develop the ability to not let me go to this every time, right? You have to force me into doing things when I have the ball that I'm not good at, right? Force me to shoot a jumper or at least force me to drive to my right. And then don't let me go back left, by the way. But then what has the person developed? They've developed patterns based on defending right-handers, and we really don't want to play D anyway. So even though we force Benton right, are we really going to defend him and not let him then just go right back to the left, which is what he's going to do, right? I'll just wait until you stop. Oh, you made me go to my right. That's fine, except I'm just going to go back to my left later on anyway. In a one-on-one game. Meanwhile, I had post moves, so it's like, and he's a guard, right? As a guard, how come I'm 5'10" with post moves? He's a 6'1" guard. Why doesn't he know how to guard me in the post? Why do I know how to back him down and have back to the basket moves? Because I developed my entire game, right? I've developed my entire game on here. Why haven't you? Why have you allowed yourself to get lured into an intellectual arena of debate and back and forth, and you've never fully developed yourself? Why? Why would you do that? That's crazy. Just like, why would I devote myself to the game of basketball for years on end? And even though I was almost always the smallest player on the court, why would I not develop myself back to the basket? Why would I not develop my ability in the post? Why wouldn't I make sure I can if my defender takes me down into the post, why am I not going to be able to defend the post? See, because every once in a while I got into a 2-on-2 game and it's like I'm actually the tallest player in the game. And then, oh, wow, this one guy thinks he's Jordan or whoever. It's like, okay, well, now I'm Barkley and I'm just going to take you into the post. And yeah, Jordan was really good back to the basket, but he wasn't as good as Barkley. So it's like, all right, maybe you're Jordan. Guess what? I'm Barkley and I'm taking you into the paint, partner. Good luck with this. You're not going to be able to stop me in the post. Sorry about your luck, because he thinks he's Jordan trying to shoot a fadeaway. All right, well, whatever, cheese ball. There's levels to this, as we see. There's levels to this. shit, now I'm in the wrong lane, but that's all right. We'll get over it. And I know I've been bragging, and some of the folks don't like to hear that, but it's appropriate, right? It's like, you know, as a man, can't we recognize that certain undertakings are at a basic level competitive, and to challenge a competitor will only ever bring up their competitive spirit, right? Like, you know, isn't there an acknowledgement of that on some level? And then in the safe space modern world, like, culturally, I was not brought up to take it easy on people, right? You know, where I'm from, life is still cheap. It certainly was cheap back in the day. And you know, where I grew up, if I said the wrong thing to the wrong person in the wrong situation, I would get punched in the motherfucking mouth, right? You know, I understand that it's now safe space. Everybody gets to shoot their mouth off. That's fine, except some of us are so intellectual and pedantic and about that life that they will just rub your fucking nose in your own lack of ability. Because again, you have a preconceived notion that's simply not true, right? And it's debatable. Sure, it's debatable. Yeah, absolutely, it's debatable. But your position is, I can force you into such a weak position that you're not going to be able to carry the day, right? It's the same as me taking you down into the post in a one-on-one basketball game. I'll just back you down into the post and make my shot every single fucking time, because you haven't strategically examined, okay, if I move this way, which way is Benton going to move? But I've already examined, if I talk this way, what are the possible counter strategies to what I'm asserting? I've already examined all of that. And I have counter moves prepared for every one. See, I have counter strategies for every possible counter strategy. Right. Why wouldn't I? I have to, in order to compete at the highest possible level. Meanwhile, I don't ever have actual formal debates, by the way. I would, I guess, if there was enough in it for me. I guess I would. Anyway, I'm almost there. I got to sign off now. I might be back since I can tell I'm on one yapping. Thanks for watching. Bye.